you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper than again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Naruto Enters Lord of the Rings. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Leaf Ranger on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. It was another peaceful day in Konohagakure no Sato. The civilians were out working, talking, and buying while their kids played. The academy students studied or goofed off in their classes. The regular shinobi went about their missions and business. None of them would have guessed that today would be any different from any other. At the gate, two Chunin guards watched as a trio of figures approached. The tallest wore a dull green cloak with the hood pulled up. A quiver full of arrows, and a longbow were seen peering over his left shoulder. His lower face was hidden by a cloth face mask, and his upper face was hidden in the shadow of the cloak's hood. The figure next to him was shorter, about the height of a kid. He also wore a cloak that was a dark green, with the hood pulled up. Almost his entire face was in a shadow, light enough to see it, but darker enough not to be able to see any distinguishing features. He carried a staff in one hand, made of a red wood, with a fox head at the end of the staff. The last figure was a girl, who appeared to be the same height as the boy next to her. She wore a light green cloak with a lily flower-shaped clasp. Her own hood was actually thrown back, revealing her long, curly brown hair. She was barefoot, but it didn't seem to bother her at all. The guards stopped the trio as they reached the gate. "All right, lower the hoods and masks and state who you are and your purpose here." The two hooded figures looked at each other, then back at the guards. The smaller one sighed, before pulling his hood back, revealing spiky, blonde locks, vivid blue eyes, and the whisker marks. The guards gasped as Naruto looked at both of them. Naruto Uzumaki, returning from extended training mission. With that, they swept past the startled guards. "Did you know he was coming back?" "No, I thought he was gone for good." The two guards looked at Naruto's retreating back. Naruto and the others headed through the village. Many civilians, and even the ninjas, stopped at the sight of Naruto. Most almost instantly glared at him, muttering how dare he return, and other things. A few though were intrigued by the new look. They watched Naruto in interest, but were still cautious. Lily looked around, frustration, and restrained anger on her face. "I see what you mean about the way you were treated. If I had to live like this, I would have left or killed myself." Naruto just gave her a smile. "It doesn't matter now. They accept or not, but it won't stop me from protecting them. It just means I will not deal with them unless I have to." They continued onward, with two of them becoming aware of the small figure that had stepped out of an alley, went eep, and dashed back to hide. Hinata Hyuga had been taking a walk during the lunch period, trying to find some happy thoughts when she had seen him. "And Naruto-kun is back. I don't believe it." She looked around the corner, her face almost completely red, and watched Naruto walking towards the Hokage's tower with the two people with him. She thought about following them, but then thought against it and turned to go back to the academy. She would find out later when she got the chance. Naruto smiled as he recognized the girl from 2 years ago. Now, he understood her actions better. He turned to Elroth. "Did you see her too?" Elroth nodded. "She watched you the day before we left, when you took us to the ramen stand." Lily looked at both of them. "Huh? What are you talking about?" Naruto elaborated. "Before I left, there was a girl in the academy who was always so shy around me. She would blush, stammer, and do other similar things. When I was a naive fool, I thought she had a fever. Now I know the truth. She was admiring me for my never-give-up attitude and my ever-happy personality. And from that admiration, it is possible that feelings arose." Lily smiled. "Ooh, little brother has a not entirely secret admirer." Naruto gave her an amused look while trying to hide the slight blush on his face. "Well, I wouldn't say that. But I do intend to get closer to her. She intrigues me because her clan has a higher affinity towards magic, and her especially. I want to find out more." Lily gave him a serious look. "So, is she nothing more than a project to you?" Naruto shook his head. "Of course not. I would never treat her like that. She intrigues me, and she was the only one who treated me with respect." Naruto said the last bit quietly. Lily placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you." Naruto smiled at her. Don't worry about it. For now, let us report back to the hokage. They made it to the tower, and Naruto looked up at the mountain behind it. Lily followed his example. It is incredible. Which is you, father? The one on the end. Minato Namikaze, he said as he headed inside. Sarutobi was in a room adjacent to his office, busy painting. He had a rare moment of not having any work, so he was spending it doing one of his favorite hobbies. He was painting. He sighed happily as he finished his current brush stroke and set the brush aside. Finally, it took me over a year, but it is done. He hung the painting up and stepped back. Very nice. A voice behind him said, "Yes, it is. I've worked." Sarutobi suddenly realized he was talking to someone he hadn't known was there, and whirled around, a kunai in his hand. It was blocked by a staff. Sarutobi's eyes widened as he saw the person holding the staff. "And Naruto, it's good to see you, Oji-san," Naruto said, a smile on his face. Sarutobi put his kunai away and hugged Naruto. "It's good to see you again, my boy." He pulled back to look Naruto over. Naruto was wearing a forest green robe with a dark green cloak over it. In one hand, he held the staff he had used, and the other rested on the hilt of a sword at his left side. Then Sarutobi saw the look in Naruto's eyes. They crackled with energy and knowledge, but the joy and mischief they held 2 years ago were still there. Sarutobi nodded. "You look impressive." "Thank you. You remember Elroth?" "Yes." Elroth bowed to the hokage. "Hokage, it is good to see you again." "Elroth-san," Sarutobi said with a bow of his own. Then he looked at the other person present. "And who is this?" Lily smiled as she curtsied. "I am Lily Fairbairn. You might consider me Naruto's unofficial sister. I am also a hobbit." "A what?" Sarutobi asked, one eyebrow raised. Naruto sighed. "There is so much I need to tell you." And with that, Naruto began relating the basics of everything he had learned. About hobbits, elves, dwarves, orcs, and the other races that once dotted Middle-earth. About the 4 great ages that had passed. About the great heroes and villains. A few hours later, when he finished, Sarutobi just stared at him. "You really did learn a lot, didn't you?" he finally asked. Naruto just nodded. "I've learned plenty of the history of Middle-earth, and Kyuubi has taught me much of the general history of the elemental nations, from what he has seen." Sarutobi slowly nodded. "Well, this is impressive. It seems this training trip did you well. Now, we have a few things to discuss. 1. Your lineage." Naruto held up a hand. "I don't want it revealed, unless absolutely necessary. I am strong, but I know my father's reputation, and that he had plenty of enemies. Until I decide the time is right, or I turn 16, or it is necessary, it doesn't need to be revealed." Sarutobi nodded. "Very well. However, you will move into the Namikaze estate as you possess the keys and the DNA to get into your home. Besides, I think you could use the extra room." Naruto nodded, and Sarutobi continued. "Secondly, the academy. Unfortunately, if you are to get out completely from under the civilian council's thumb, you must become a ninja. You can retake your place in your year group. Your previous records and grades will affect your rank in the class, but you still have 1 year to change that." Naruto nodded again. "I understand. Although, with the exception of academic knowledge, I'm already genin to mid-chunin in most of the main skills of shinobi. So, the academy shouldn't be a problem." "Good. Then, I shall escort you to your home, and—" "Hokage-sama, please forgive my interruption. The councils have assembled, and they are immediately requesting that you come with Naruto." An Anbu appeared on one knee, his head held down. Sarutobi sighed. "Well, come along then, Naruto. Let's get this over with." Naruto nodded, and the 4 of them headed to the meeting room. Sarutobi paused outside the door, sighed as he looked down in frustration, before opening the doors. The council members stopped their chatter as the doors opened. Naruto glanced around, and immediately recognized the shinobi council members from their children in the academy, or from the history lessons they had been taught. Hiyashi Hyuga, who was sitting next to Shibuya Buram. Suman Yuzuka sat on Shibai's other side, followed by Inoichi Yamanaka, Chusa Akimichi, and Shikaku Nara. The other side of the table was dominated by the civilians who represented the major business guilds of Konoha, with an old crippled man at the end. On either side of the chair for the Hokage were his 2 teammates, and his main advisors, Koharu Udatain and Hamura Mitokado. Almost immediately, the civilians glared at him. The 2 elders and the crippled man looked at him with disdain, but slight interest as well. The Nara, Hyuga, and Yamanaka heads looked at him in disinterest, and the Aburame gave his clan's patented neutral look. However, both Chusa and Tsum seemed happy to see him. Sarutobi moved around the table and sat in his seat. "All right, what are we gathered for this time?" Koharu looked at him. "We are judging whether or not Naruto is a risk to Konoha." Naruto Uzumaki, you just returned from a 2-year training trip, yes. Naruto nodded. Koharu continued. Why were you, a 3rd-year academy student, taken on this training trip? Naruto looked at Elroth before turning back to the council. The man who trained me found that I could utilize unique abilities that he could use as well. He trained me in these abilities and the history behind them. However, I am not at liberty to reveal the full extent of this ability, at least not until it is absolutely necessary. One of the civilians roared as he stood up. Arrogant child, what did you learn? Naruto looked at him before closing his eyes. When he opened them again, they had hardened somewhat, and Naruto looked him over. I suggest you not be quite so rude. There is a chance that my abilities could be the start of a Kekai Genkai. And if I should leave the village and tell others about my abilities, then they might be a bit more polite and persuasive towards me. At the mention of a Kekai Genkai, all the council looked at each other. The crippled man leaned forward. Hokage-sama, if what the boy says is true, then I suggest he be taken into a NBU custody until a thorough examination of his abilities can be conducted. Sarutobi shook his head. That won't be necessary. Naruto has already given me a demonstration and explanation of his abilities, although the news of them being a Kekai Genkai is news to me. Naruto lowered his head. Forgive me, Hokage-sama. At the time, it had slipped my mind that it could be passed down. Sarutobi nodded before looking around the chamber. Naruto has returned and explained everything to me. I can safely say that he is no threat to the village. He only wishes to lead the life of a shinobi and protect his home. Those who hated the boy grumbled, but none of them could find a way to get around Sarutobi. Then Hamura looked at Naruto's companions. And who are you two? Elroth glanced at the old man. Isn't it customary to introduce yourself first? Hamura glared at the apparent young teen. Show respect towards you elders and betters. Elder, yes. Better, never. I have no allegiance to this village, or any. Why should I show you respect you haven't earned? Hamura fumed, but Hayashi prevented an incident by leaning forward. Please, would you tell us who you are and why you are here? Elroth looked at Hayashi. You have manners at least. I am impressed. I am Elroth, son of Irondil, and I am one of Naruto's teachers as well as his protector. The civilians looked at him in disgust, and one mumbled demon lover under his breath. Elroth merely shook it off while Hayashi turned to Lily. And you? Lily curtsied. I am Lily Fairbairn. I helped teach Naruto stealth and throwing weapons. I am also his sister and guardian as well, she stated proudly, daring anyone to refute her statement. No one did, but some of them seemed to chuckle. And how do you plan to guard him when you are not much older yourself? One of the civilians laughed. Lily just coolly looked him over. It may come as a shock, but I'm actually 21, she said. Everyone stopped at this statement. Sarutobi took this moment to make his move to end this. Well, if there are no further questions, I believe we are done here. Naruto, you and your 2 friends may go. Naruto nodded, and he left with Elroth and Lily. Sarutobi sighed as he sat back in his seat. Now, there is something I actually wish to bring up. Something that has been bothering me for a while now. It has come to my attention that some civilian shopkeepers have been refusing service to a couple of our ninja. Either that, or they have been selling them bad quality products, or overcharging. This is done simply in spite of the ninja. A prime example would be Anko Mitarashi, as she has been refused service in a couple of establishments. Some of the civilians shrugged. And what do you plan to do about it, Hokage-sama? Sarutobi just gave the civilians a grin, which gave them chills up their spines. I propose that should any shopkeeper refuse service or hinder a shinobi in the purchase of good quality items, they will be found guilty of treason against Konoha. Should they be found guilty, they will forfeit their shop and all in it to said shinobi. Also, they will be sentenced to 5 years forced labor. The civilians looked at each other. They could get by not harassing Anko for being the apprentice to the traitor Orochimaru. But if this law came into effect, it would mean that if Naruto ever became a ninja, the owners of all the shops and restaurants would be forced to treat him with respect. Danzu simply nodded. I believe this is an excellent suggestion. All those in favor, all the shinobi clan heads, the 2 advisors, Danzu and Sarutobi raised their hands. The civilians looked unhappy as that was over half the council. Opposed? The civilians sullenly raised their hands. Danzu nodded. The law is passed. Any ninja of genin rank or higher will be protected by this law. Sarutobi nodded. Meeting adjourned. He left, intent on returning and starting the new book his student Jiraiya had sent him. He suppressed the perverted giggle he felt rise up in him. One of the civilians came over to Danzu. Are you mad? This new law protects the Kyuubi brat as well. Only if he becomes a genin, Danzu said. The realization hit the civilian and he nodded. Danzu smiled as he turned and left. Naruto would have to rejoin the academy and he would use his ally in the academy to ensure that Naruto failed. Then, he would take the boy and make him part of his private shinobi army. Back in the Hokage's office, Naruto sat in a seat, going over the Rasengan scroll again. He was pretty sure he had the jutsu down, but something still felt a little off, and until he had perfected the Rasengan at its current level, he dared not use it. His eyes wandered over some of the notes his dad had left. What surprised him the most was that the Rasengan wasn't even the finished product. While as a jutsu, it was complete, his father had wanted to do more, such as adding an element to it. Naruto nodded at the thought. The idea of adding element manipulation to a chakra molding attack is indeed quite a feat, and something that many might consider impossible. However, considering what my father was capable of, then it just might be possible. It would be best to use an element close to the design of the Rasengan. I guess that if I should begin work on this, I'll add a wind element to it. Quite ambitious. Not even a genin yet, and you're already talking about jutsus that might cause a kage to pale at the thought, Kyuubi said, before curling up for a nap. Naruto shook his head. Nothing wrong with planning for the future. He put the scroll away as Sarutobi came in. He came around to his desk and sat down. Well, some good came from the meeting. If you make it to genin, I can promise that you won't have to worry about shopkeepers throwing you out. But you might want to keep an eye out for anyone who tries and interferes with you at the academy. Naruto nodded, as did Elroth and Lily. Naruto pulled out all the jutsu scrolls he had been given and handed them to Sarutobi. Thanks for the use of these. I learned as much as I could from them. I also burned the note with the shadow clone jutsu on it, so no worries there. Now, where is my new home? Sarutobi placed the scrolls aside and stood up. Follow me. 20 minutes later, they were standing on top of the Hokage monument, looking at a two-story building inside a wall. Naruto nodded. My father had good taste, simple in design, and perfect for directing the defense of the village, should he be here instead of at the tower. Also, it could act as a last line of defense with the security seals in place. Naruto stepped forward and placed his hand on the seal over the gate in the wall. The seal dulled, and the gate opened, allowing the group of 4 to enter. The grounds were spacious, with a koi pond and several trees. Naruto headed to the front door, where a more complex seal waited. He studied it, then remembered what his dad had said about the seal, when he finally claimed his home. Naruto bit his thumb and spread the blood over his 5 fingertips, before placing the fingertips on the seal. It dulled as well, allowing Naruto to unlock the front door and usher them in. The entrance hall was simple and yet elegant at the same time. Everything had a purpose, whether sentimental or otherwise. Naruto slowly headed through it, looking around. They eventually came to a living room, which had a couch, a coffee table, and a fireplace. A hallway at one side of the room led them into the kitchen, which was half stocked with instant ramen cups. Naruto smiled, as apparently either his mom or dad had been as much of a ramen lover as he had been. Another hallway at the back of the living room led out back, which had a beautiful garden. Back in the hall leading to the kitchen, there were 2 flights of stairs. One led up, while the other led down. Naruto glanced at them before heading upwards. The upstairs proved to be one long hall, with several bedrooms and a couple of bathrooms. At the end of the hall was the master bedroom. Naruto looked at the door, then turned away. I'll look in there later, he said. Elroth and Lily had both already claimed rooms, where Lily dropped her pack of things, and Elroth had deposited his quiver and bow, along with his travel roll and pack. They all headed downstairs, and then down the other flight, and into a training dojo. One wall was lined with weapon racks and training dummies. Another wall held numerous targets, some regular round targets, others were human-shaped targets, with specific areas to hit for a fatal or crippling blow. Naruto looked around in amazement, before examining a door leading from the dojo. Inside was a small library, containing history books, epic novels, and stories. One wall was labeled jutsus, and after examination, Naruto found that the books and scrolls there were filled with generic jutsus of varying levels, as well as some jutsu that some clans considered their own private jutsus. One example was a fireball jutsu that Naruto remembered hearing Sasuke brag about learning, before the massacre of his clan. Naruto smiled as he scanned the jutsu. I might not be as strong in fire jutsus as Sasuke, but I can at least take this jutsu and make it my own. Thoughts had already gone through his head about what he could do. He turned to Sarutobi, who was smiling at him. Already studying. Just like your father, he always seemed to want to learn new things too. Naruto smiled before placing the scroll away. Thanks, Oji-san. This is great. You're welcome. Now, you start the academy back up in 3 days. They've barely started, and the only thing you really need to catch up on is your academics. I would suggest also changing your style of clothing. The robe is impressive, but it may be awkward in movement for a ninja. With that Naruto by left. Naruto nodded as he headed off. It's a good thing my dad left me his money in the will. I'll be back in an hour or two. Don't get into trouble. Elroth just nodded, but Lily quickly ran after him. Oh no, I'm not letting you out of my sight. Especially not in this crazy village. Naruto just laughed. Alright, maybe we could find something out there you like. The market district. Naruto stopped in an alley not far from a clothing shop. He motioned for Lily to wait before performing a transformation. He turned into an 11-year-old boy with long brown hair and green eyes. He turned to Lily and nodded, and they entered the shopping district. He led her into a clothing shop, which had thrown him out when he was 7, trying to buy a new shirt. Now, the cashier looked up and smiled at the two of them. How may I help you? Do you do custom clothing here? Naruto asked, masking his voice. The lady cashier nodded. Yes, we do. What do you want? Well, I was thinking of a coat like the one the Yondaime wore, except dark green with black flames along the bottom. Do you think you can do it? The lady smiled. Of course we can. In fact, this is the shop where the Yondaime got his coats from. Here, let me take your measurements. As she measured him, he asked, do you think you could have it done by the day after tomorrow? I was kinda hoping to wear it to the academy. Or, so you're a ninja. Well, I certainly will try. Come back around 1, and we'll see if it's done or not. After she was done, Naruto went around, buying some other clothing items. He walked out with several bags, most for him, but a few for Lily. The cashier waved at them, before heading into the back to get to work. Naruto led Lily all around the market area, buying weapons, writing material, everything he needed to stock up on for the academy or in his home. Finally, they headed back home. Naruto approached the door to the master bedroom and hesitated before opening the door. Inside, there was a king-size bed, 2 bedside nightstands, and a few small bookcases. Naruto placed his bags on the bed and slowly opened one of the doors, revealing a large bathroom. Another door was the closet, where his father's coats hung with jounin pants and shirts and formal kimonos. His mom's clothes consisted of kunoichi tops and pants, regular blouses and skirts, and a few kimonos of her own. Naruto smiled, before scooting all their clothes to the back of the closet. He began hanging his own clothes up. As he finished, he headed back downstairs, all the way to the dojo. He entered the library and performed the shadow clone jutsu. 20 Narutos appeared, and immediately began pulling out every book on history they could find. Naruto himself turned back to his Rasengan scroll. Now, let's see if we can get this right. 2 days later, at the academy, the students of the oldest year at the academy entered their classroom and began talking, arguing, or in the case of a certain Shikamaru Nara, sleeping. Hinata moved to the back row where she always sat. She sighed as she placed her pack on the ground next to her. She had spent her free time over the past 2 days looking for Naruto to try and find out what happened, or at least follow him, but he had disappeared again. She was beginning to wonder if she had just seen things. Even if I did find him, why would he be interested in me? She thought, the gnawing self-doubt overcoming her. It all began with her mom dying. Her father had never been pleased with her training, but her mom had encouraged her, kept her spirit alive. Then she died, giving birth to Hanabi. Without her mother's encouragement, Hinata started letting her father's words get to her, until she believed she was weak. And that doubt extended towards everything in her life. She straightened up as the door opened. 2 girls fought against each other to be the first in, before finally falling into the room together. Sakura Haruno leapt over her ex-friend and rival, Ino Yamanaka. The blonde girl wore a purple 2-piece with bandages around her midriff and thighs and white arm warmers with a long blonde ponytail. Sakura rushed down and claimed the seat next to Sasuke. She turned and smirked at Ino, who raged at Sakura. Get out of my seat, billboard brow. Make me, Ino pig, Sakura said, sticking her tongue out. Billboard brow, Ino pig. Hinata sighed as she looked back down at her desk. It was the usual argument between the two. She wished they would stop, and she wasn't the only one. Shikamaru Nara was wide awake, despite what others thought. He clamped his eyes shut and silently wished for someone to shut them up. What a drag. Choji Akamichi was munching on his chips as he watched. To him, it was a sad show of a friendship gone bad. He remembered when he used to be alone, made fun of because of his size. Then he met Shikamaru, and he knew he would never trade that friendship for anything. Kiba and Yuzuka growled in annoyance as he clamped his hands over his ears. In his jacket, a small white puppy did the same with his paws. Sorry about this, Akamaru. To Kiba, both the girls were loud, annoying, and completely loony in the head. But Ino was the least cute. Shino Aburame just sat there, not giving off any impressions of what was going through his head. Sasuke just sat there, his mind revolving on what training he was going to do next, and how he could get more power to kill him. Into this walked Iruka Yumino and Mizuki Taoji. Both were dressed in standard Chunin uniforms. Iruka's dapper hair was done up in a pineapple-looking ponytail. He had a scar across the bridge of his nose. Mizuki had sliver white hair, and his headband was tied like a bandana over his hair. Mizuki sighed. They're at it again. Whose turn is it? Iruka looked at him. I'll pay you my next month's salary to deal with them. Mizuki looked at him. You crazy. There's not enough money in the world to make me get in their way. You do it. Iruka looked down in defeat before looking up. He drew in his breath, then his head suddenly swelled as he yelled, "Shut up." All the students immediately looked up as silence reigned over the room. Iruka's head returned to normal, while Mizuki looked at him with some admiration. I need to learn that. No way. It's my own personal jutsu. With that, they turned to the class, and Iruka looked at the note the hokage had sent him. All right everyone. We've got an announcement. We've got an old student coming back, he said, confusion in his voice. The only student that this could be referring to was Naruto, but he hadn't been seen in 2 years. Mizuki hid his feelings, but inside, he felt disgust. So, the demon brat returns. That is what Danzu was on about. At least this helps me with Orochimaru's plan. Sakura raised her hand. Iruka-sensei, who is this student? Iruka placed the note to one side. Well, who is the only student that was in our class, but not here any longer? Sakura's eyes widened. You mean Naruto Baka? I thought he had quit. There were several others who agreed. Iruka shrugged. I don't know. We'll find out here when he finally arrives. Kiba smiled. Well, at least I won't be dead last anymore. He couldn't do anything right. Most of the other students laughed, except Sasuke, Shikamaru, Shino, Choji, and Hinata. Sasuke didn't laugh anymore, even if he did agree with Kiba. Shikamaru thought it was too much of a drag. Shino just didn't laugh at all. Choji didn't like people making fun of someone else like he once was. And Hinata just didn't like anyone making fun of Naruto. She felt a rare moment of anger directed at Kiba. Naruto-kun is stronger than you think. He'll prove you all wrong, she thought to herself. Iruka raised a hand for silence. Kiba, while Naruto may have been a troublemaker and not very good at working, you shouldn't make fun of him. He is a fellow shinobi in training. Would you like to be treated that way? Give the kid a break, Iruka. Mizuki whispered to him. He did hit the nail on the head. Iruka sighed. I know, but still, we should give him a chance. At that moment, the door opened and a figure entered. Everyone turned and gasped as the figure smiled at them. Anyone miss me? Naruto asked. Naruto just smiled at them, almost as if wondering what had all of them surprised. But he knew what had them all with their mouths hanging open. Naruto was wearing a pair of black cargo pants with a kunai holster around each thigh. He was wearing a forest green long-sleeved shirt with the picture of a crossed sword and staff over a fox head. But what really caught everyone's attention was the coat he wore. It was short-sleeved with a high collar. It was forest green in color, just like the shirt, but with black flames licking the bottom of it. On the back was stitched Wizard of Kitsune in black thread. To complete the outfit, Naruto wore a pair of black fingerless gloves with metal studs sewn into the knuckles of the gloves, and a pair of black shinobi sandals. Naruto turned to Iruka and Mizuki. Iruka-sensei, Mizuki-sensei. Good to see both of you again. How have you two been? Iruka shook Naruto's hand, shock still on his face. If he didn't know better, he could have sworn that a mini Minato was standing in front of him. Just take away the whisker marks, and they would have been alike. Mizuki was thinking the same thing, but for different reasons. Damn demon Brad is just calling attention to himself. Who does he think he is, wearing a coat like the Yondames? The class were also in shock. Shikamaru's head was actually up, and his mouth slightly open in shock. This is Naruto. What happened? This kid looks like he could beat most of us with no problem. That Baka, just trying to get attention to himself. That coat doesn't prove anything. Sasuke thought, secure in his mindset that because he was an Uchiha, he was elite. And in Naruto-kun, he looked so hot. Hinata thought, as she studied his clothing. It was attention-grabbing, but only if you knew about the Yondame. Otherwise, it was a good color for camouflage. Hey, you Baka, what are you doing? Trying to be cool like Sasuke-kun? Sakura shouted, her hand held in a fist. No way was this upstart going to be cooler than her Sasuke-kun. Naruto just merely turned to her, his good mood mostly disappearing. Sakura was taken aback by this, as she remembered Naruto was always trying to get her to go out with him. I don't care about being cooler than your Sasuke-kun. I'm wearing this, because this is the closest I could find in ninja wear that was like what I wore while training for the past 2 years. And that is what I have been doing. I went on a training trip to control abilities that have been given to me. Like what? Being annoying and a loser, Kiba yelled out, causing people to laugh. Hinata glared at Kiba as her anger flared again. But she stopped as Kiba's chair suddenly broke under him, and he fell on his back. Everyone started laughing at him, while Naruto just smiled. It would seem Kiba needs a new chair. Obviously, that one was worn out. Inside, Kyuubi chuckled at what Naruto did. The prankster after my own heart. Revenge is sweet sometimes. Naruto turned back to Iruka. Anyways, is there anything you need to know before we get started? Iruka finally was able to get into teacher mode. Well, the hokage was a little vague on where you stand. Obviously, your previous records have left you as the dead last of the class. But if we can test your abilities, we can add it all together and see where you are at. Naruto nodded. Well, academically, I know most everything about the history of the elemental nations, and the entire history of the land before ninjas were around. However, my history of Konoha itself is rusty, so I do need to catch up there. As for my more physical abilities, why don't we head outside, and I can show you both. Iruka and Mizuki nodded, with Mizuki smiling. Perfect. I can have him fight Sasuke in Taijutsu, and have him be humiliated. The entire class trooped outside, where Iruka had Naruto face a row of targets. Okay, I want you to use 5 shuriken and 5 kunai. Get as many targets as you can. Naruto nodded and reached into a weapons pouch hidden under his coat. He pulled out 5 kunai and shuriken, with the kunai in one hand and the shurikens in the other. He eyed the 5 targets before letting loose with one hand, followed quickly by the other. There were several whistles from the weapons cutting through the air before all the weapons thunked into the targets. 1 kunai and 1 shuriken to each bullseye of each target. Everyone just stared in amazement, and for one person, jealousy. What was that? How could he do that? I can't do that, and I'm an Uchiha. Sasuke seethed. His best had been 4 kunai on target, 1 near the center, and the shurikens all on target, and that had been releasing them 2 at a time. He glared at the blonde. Enjoy it now. I'll beat you soon enough. Iruka nodded as he recorded the score, and style in which it was done. Very good. Now, what can you do in ninjutsu? Naruto turned and moved to an open area. Since I can't do regular clones, I have something better that was taught to me to help me with my training trip. Naruto returned to normal and leapt out from behind the target. While in the air, he formed what had become one of his favorite hand signs, Shadow Clone Jutsu. There was a huge cloud of smoke, and out of it, 50 Narutos appeared. They all landed in the clearing, before raising one hand in a victory hand sign. Most everyone was amazed at the number of clones, but to them, nothing was really impressive other than the number. But that was because they didn't know about shadow clones. But both Iruka and Mizuki were amazed, and one of them was also fearful. Those are solid clones, and 50 of them too, and he doesn't even look tired. What kind of training did he go through? This isn't good. He knows the Shadow Clone Jutsu, and can make a lot too. How did he get his hands on the Forbidden Scroll? Okay, that is impressive, but so what? He can make a lot of clones, Kiba quipped. One of the clones just looked at him before coming over and flicking his forehead. Kiba growled and swung a fist only to be caught and twisted so he was on his back. The clone just smiled before disappearing. Naruto nodded, and one by one, the clones disappeared. Shadow clones are Konoha's equivalent of other countries' solid clones, like the mud and water clones. Shadow clones are superior to both though, in that they have their own chakra to use, and you know everything they learn before they die. However, the amount of chakra needed is immense, so it's not a jutsu that can be learned by anyone except those with high chakra, like me. With that, he turned back to the targets. Besides that one, I know quite a few other ninjutsus, including a special variation of one that I use with my special abilities. Took me 2 days to get it down to what I have so far. He turned to the targets as he peeled a scroll from one of the pockets on his pants. He unrolled it, summoning his staff. He grabbed it before closing his eyes. He suddenly opened them and the staff head pulsed before erupting into flames. He ran through one-handed hand signs before placing his thumb and pointer finger into a ring in front of his mouth. Wizard Fire Style Grand Fireball Jutsu. With that, he unleashed a stream of fire which connected with the fire on the staff, doubling its power. A huge fireball erupted from the staff and hit all 5 targets, engulfing them in flames. Naruto smiled as he stopped. He turned back to the others, placing the staff back in its scroll. That was at about 75%. I still can't keep it going without burning myself. And if I did it without the staff, I would have to pour more chakra into it to get it to be half that size. Everyone was again in shock. When Naruto had left, he couldn't do anything except the transformation. Now, he was summoning clones and performing elemental jutsus. Sasuke was seething even more as Naruto had not only shown him up, but had done it with a jutsu that was his family's by right. Iruka had dropped his clipboard and was staring at the smoking ruins of what had been 5 targets. He slowly picked the clipboard up, only for it to be shaking slightly. 5 to 5, very good, Naruto. Okay, we just need to see your taijutsu. And in order to get a good idea, I say we have him fight Sasuke. After all, he is the #1 rookie 4 years running, Mizuki said with a smirk. Even if the kid knew ninjutsu, his taijutsu was always horrid, and Sasuke's constant training had him in perfect form. Naruto shrugged as he was led to another cleared area where the students had spars and were taught the basic academy taijutsu. Sasuke took one spot and Naruto stood opposite of him. Already, the Sasuke fan club were cheering and yelling how he had this in the bag. Sasuke just glared at Naruto. Where did you learn to make a fireball that big? I demand you teach me. Naruto just sighed. I can't, for 4 specific reasons. 1. You don't have what it takes to learn my abilities. 2. Even if you did, your dark ambitions would lead you to corruption and misuse of these powers. 3. You didn't say please. And 4. I just don't plain like you. Sasuke growled. As the last surviving member of the elite Uchiha clan, I demand you teach me how to do that. Naruto just shook his head. Tell you what, if you can prove to me you're my better by beating me in this match, I'll try to teach you. If you lose, don't bug me about this again. Mizuki just smiled. Begin. Sasuke lunged at Naruto, going for a right hook. Naruto leaned his head to the left, and the fist went past his face. But Sasuke smirked as he turned and brought his left foot around. Naruto crossed his arms in front of his face, and the kick hit his forearms, driving him back a few inches. Sasuke jumped back as Naruto lowered his arms. Was that supposed to hurt? He said as Sasuke growled again, and this time he spun at Naruto, going for a spinning axe kick. Naruto rolled forward and under Sasuke, before turning and kicking back with his left leg. Sasuke, who had just landed his kick on the ground, took the hit to the back of his head, which sent him flying. He crashed into the ground and skidded while Naruto just stood there, waiting. Sasuke slowly pushed himself up, shaking his head. He had never been hit like that, not since he had sparred with his father and brother before the massacre. He turned and charged. The two met in a flurry of punches and kicks. After a minute, they both separated. Both had gotten in good hits, but Naruto didn't feel Sasuke's hits as much because he was used to getting beat up by his shadow clones and Elroth in spars. Sasuke growled as he launched his right fist at Naruto's face. Naruto waited till the last second, then ducked under Sasuke's fist. Sasuke's eyes widened, then widened even more as he felt Naruto's fist slam into his gut. The metal studs added to the damage, causing Sasuke to lose his wind and actually cough up blood. Naruto brought his left fist up into an uppercut, knocking Sasuke into the air. Naruto jumped up and delivered a spinning axe kick to Sasuke's gut, slamming him into the ground. Naruto stood over Sasuke before shaking his head and turning away. At that moment, the crowd was silent. Then screams of fear and outrage came from Sasuke's fangirls, while several of the guys cheered Naruto. Kiba stepped back as Naruto moved past him. At that moment, Sakura came charging at him from behind. Naruto, she yelled as she readied to slam her fist into the back of his head. Naruto turned and grabbed her fist easily. She stopped and stared at his eyes, which had actually gone cold. I'm not your punching bag anymore, Sakura. And if you had any intelligence, you would know that if I just beat Sasuke, what chance do you have? I give you this warning once. Don't mess with me. He dropped Sakura's fist and turned away. Sakura was holding her hand, her eyes starting to glisten slightly as she wondered what had happened to the blonde who kept asking her for dates. Then Naruto stopped and turned around. A little advice. If you actually want Sasuke to notice you, try being a kunoichi first, a real person second, and a fangirl never. He might actually like you then. Then he turned back around and walked over to Iruka. So, anything else? Iruka slowly shook his head. No, that's all. Everyone back into class, he yelled. They all headed off, but Iruka looked at the blonde. Naruto, what happened to you? He thought as they returned to the academy. All the students got back in, except Sasuke, who Mizuki had carried to the nurse's office. Everyone gave Naruto a clear berth as he moved up the row of desks towards the back. Hinata's face started to turn red as she realized Naruto was heading in her direction. What do I do? Calm down. He'll probably sit somewhere else. Is this seat taken? She immediately looked up to see Naruto pointing at the seat right next to hers. Her blush increased, and she immediately began poking her pointer fingers together. And no, why you can sit there. Naruto smiled at her before gently sitting down. Thanks. He sat down, only to notice her looking away and continuing to poke her fingers. He looked away slowly, feeling slightly ashamed. I'm sorry if I'm scared you out there. And no, you didn't. I come on, speak normally, she mentally yelled at herself. Naruto smiled, and she blushed even more. It's okay, Hinata. Don't worry about it. She slowly smiled as she looked away, feeling a small flame of hope leap up inside her. Iruka came in and placed his clipboard on his desk. Okay, well, today we will be going over the fundamentals of elemental manipulation. Now, with the exception of some, this is probably not something you will be able to truly master until you are at least Chunin. Now, as Sasuke and Naruto had both proven, there are exceptions. He turned towards the blackboard, only to see a seal pop up on it when he turned. Suddenly, it exploded into smoke, completing engulfing him. When it cleared, Iruka was covered in makeup, with a frilly pink apron on over his ninja attire. Almost immediately, everyone started laughing, except for the stoic Shino and Shikamaru, who muttered troublesome under his breath. Iruka looked himself over before glaring up at the back row. Naruto held his hands up. Don't look at me. I was sitting here the entire time, talking to Hinata. Hinata slowly nodded. Iruka glared around the class. If I find the one who did this, detention for a month. With that, he ripped the apron off and wiped his face with it. Naruto just smirked internally. Shadow clones. Gotta love him. That afternoon, at the Namikaze estate, Naruto entered his home and placed his backpack on the floor of the hallway. I'm home, he shouted. Almost immediately Lily appeared. Welcome back. How was your first day of school? She asked. Naruto just smiled internally, while externally he rolled his eyes. Just fine, Aka-san. I got myself settled in, and with the exception of academics, I'm already on my way to establishing myself as Rookie of the Year. I definitely need to do that, if I'm not going to be on the same team as that Uchiha team. He tried to force me to teach him that magic, chakra version of the Grand Fireball technique. All because he is an elite Uchiha. Lily sighed. What can you do? That's the way some people are. Naruto nodded. Anyways, I talked to Hinata today. She definitely has some confidence issues, most likely thanks to her oh-so-loving family. But hopefully, I can help her in the year we have left. Lily smiled. Anything I can do to help. Naruto thought for a moment. Well, if I can get her to come here to train, you could help her feel more confident as a girl. She wears a bulky coat, which I think is because she is shy about her figure. That coat could hinder her though, as it could cause her to overheat or be spotted while she is hiding. You could help her feel more confident about herself while I work on her confidence in her abilities. Lily nodded. Gotcha. For now, what are you going to do? Find out what is wrong with my Rasengan and work on fine-tuning my elemental jutsus. I want to be in the best fighting shape I can be before I graduate. With that, he disappeared downstairs into the training dojo. Next day, at the academy, Hinata made her way to the classroom, ready for another day of learning and training. She smiled slightly, remembering what had possibly been the best day of her life. And Naruto-kun actually sat next to me, and he talked to me. And maybe now I can get to know him better. Hinata had no illusions about her feelings towards Naruto. She admired his strength and courage, and his will to never back down and keep trying. And she admitted to herself she liked Naruto. But did she really know him? Other than he was an orphan and liked ramen, and used to be really loud. But now Naruto was different. He could answer questions, he actually sat there and listened. He was Naruto, but he was a slightly different Naruto. One that she needed to know who he really was inside. She entered the classroom and was surprised to see Naruto sitting in the same seat he had taken yesterday. He turned and smiled at her, indicating the seat next to him. I saved your seat for you, Hinata. She immediately blushed and poked her fingers together. Thank you, and Naruto-kun. She slowly sat in the seat next to him as he went over a piece of paper. Hey, Hinata, can I ask you something? Hinata blushed even more and slowly nodded. Well, I'm trying to catch up, at least academically. You wouldn't happen to remember everything that you all went over when I was away, would you? About the history of Konoha and stuff. Hinata smiled, relieved now that she kept all her notes during the school year. She slowly nodded. I have end notes on everything, back at MIH house. I could get them for YU. Naruto smiled. Thanks a bunch. You could come to my house with them after the academy, and maybe we could train together. Hinata's eyes went wide, and her blush went to a dark red, almost purple. She was frozen in shock before slowly nodding. SSSS sure. She managed to squeak out. Great. Thanks a bunch, Hinata-chan. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Hinata heard Naruto call her Chan, and her mind went into shock. He called me Hinata-chan, she thought, as she fainted and fell forward. Naruto immediately grabbed her to keep her from hitting the desk. Maybe I shouldn't have called her Hinata-chan yet. But still, this just proves she needs a real friend and trainer, one who won't judge her. He slowly eased her head down onto the desk, where he noticed that she had a happy smile on her face. He smiled at the sight of it. I'm glad I could make you happy. At that moment, Sakura and Ino entered in their usual rush to beat each other. They came flying through the door and crashed to the floor. They both leapt up and were about to argue when Sakura noticed Naruto sitting next to Hinata. She also noticed Hinata was unconscious and her face was bright red. Naruto baka, what did you do to Hinata? She yelled. Naruto just merely turned to her. Why did I like her again? Because when you were an idiot, you thought she was pretty and you liked that she gave you attention. Even if said attention was her punching you through a wall. Kyuubi said, as he lay in the middle of a field, munching on a few rabbits, the way Chaoji munched on chips. Well, Sakura, I offered to let Hinata train with me, and she fainted after agreeing. Maybe if she had some people helping her with her confidence, she wouldn't faint so much, Naruto said, glaring at both Ino and Sakura. They both looked sheepish for a moment before moving away and sitting down since Sasuke was there yet. The rest of the class slowly came in as the minutes went by. When Kiba came in, he came over to Naruto and looked at the ground, somewhat ashamed with himself. Look, Naruto, I'm sorry about yesterday. I talked to my mom, and she told me I should treat you better since you've had a rough life. So, I'm sorry. Naruto just nodded and smiled. It's okay. I was a baka and a loser back then. Not anymore though. I should warn you, I don't plan on staying dead last much longer. Kiba growled, in a friendly, competitive way. Oh yeah? Well, I won't let you beat me. I'm going to prove why I'm top dog around here. Naruto just smiled. Good luck. You still have to beat Shikamaru, who is barely even trying. Kiba just growled again, before going to get his own seat. At this moment, Hinata began to wake up. And Naruto-kun. What happened? Naruto offered her a bottle of water he had in his backpack. Well, I offered to let you train with me at my home, and you sort of fainted. She looked away in shame. You must think I'm weak. But that just proves that you haven't exactly had the best teachers. Which is why I want to train with you. I want to give you the confidence you need to succeed at whatever it is you want to do. She looked at him, only to be met with a smile. She slowly smiled back. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Little did either of them realize they were being watched by two separate people. Iruka smiled as he heard Naruto's little declaration. He definitely has matured, but he's still his same old self, helping those who need it. Meanwhile, Sarutobi was watching the whole thing with his crystal ball. He smiled as he sat back and began writing up something. Sasuke entered, not looking any worse from his spar with Naruto. The blonde sighed as he sat back. Probably, the medical ninjas wanted their precious Uchiha looking all nice. For him, they did the bare minimum and left him at that. That was of course when Kyuubi didn't heal him up. Sasuke glared at the blonde, sitting in the back row. He couldn't believe that Naruto had shown him up yesterday. He had beaten him in everything. Sasuke vowed he wouldn't let some nobody take his spot as the #1 rookie. He sat down at his usually seat and began going over various plans to either gain Naruto's power or a power to surpass Naruto's. Iruka and Mizuki walked in and smiled at everyone. At least, Iruka genuinely smiled, while Mizuki's smile was fake. So many targets. Orochimaru wants me to watch both Sasuke and the Hyuga girl for experimentation and possible use later on, while Danzu has me watching everyone for potential for root, and to keep Naruto from passing. Well, if the rewards they promise are as good as they say, I don't have any problems. Iruka picked up a stack of papers as everyone settled down. I hope you all are ready for a pop quiz, he said cheerfully while most of the students groaned. The exceptions being Sakura, who looked smug since she could again flaunt her intelligence, Shino, and surprisingly, Naruto. Iruka started passing out the tests, not noticing Mizuki discreetly making a few hand signs. He handed Naruto his test with a smile, before turning away, and at that moment, Mizuki placed a genjutsu on Naruto's test. Naruto sensed the slight flare of chakra, which was small enough to escape most of the students and Iruka's senses. He did notice that Hinata, Sakura, and Shino all stiffened and looked around. He also took a look around, only to notice that Mizuki's chakra was currently the one flaring slightly. He looked down at his test paper. Wait a minute. I saw the first question when Iruka passed it to me. This was it. In an instant, he realized what was going on. That team is using genjutsu, a very simple one, but effective. He closed his eyes and sent out a small pulse of chakra which disrupted the genjutsu. Then he got to work. Mizuki panicked as he felt the chakra pulse. The brat saw through my illusion. But how? He's supposed to stink at Jinjutsu. Naruto just merely glanced up, his eyes flashing at Mizuki in anger, before he got back to his test. Half an hour later, Baruka gathered them up. Well, I'll hand these back out after lunch, and we'll see how you did. In the meantime, today's topic is economic crisis that began during the Third Great Shinobi War, and almost led to Suna and a few smaller countries being bankrupt. A few hours later, the class was let out for lunch. Hinata simply pulled a bento out and headed for her usual spot when she was stopped by Naruto. I was heading over to Ikaraku for lunch. Do you want to join me? He asked, with a smile on his face. Hinata immediately blushed and looked away, but nodded happily. Naruto smiled, before his eyes landed on her bento. I'm sorry, I mean, if you want to eat that, you can bring it along. Hinata looked at it, then looked back up at him. Well, we could maybe. Let's share it. With the ramen. Naruto looked at her and nodded. Okay, I'm supposed to vary my diet anyways, so that would work. With that, he held out a hand in an after-you gesture. She slowly nodded, before heading off, with him right beside her. The two walked the streets of Konoha, heading to Naruto's favorite ramen stand. Naruto smiled, remembering the bone-crushing hug he had received from Iame, and the huge smile and free ramen he had received from Tuchai when he had stopped by to see them after he had returned. Not only that, but both Iame and Lily had hit it off and took it upon themselves to be the best Ni-chans they could be for Naruto. Naruto smiled as he sat down, and Hinata hesitantly took a spot next to him. Hey, Tuchai-san, I am Ni-chan. I'm back. Tuchai and Iame appeared and smiled at their favorite customer. Naruto, good to see you back. And who is your friend here? Naruto smiled at her encouragingly. I am Hinata Hyuga. Pleased to meet you both. Iame smiled at Hinata. I'm glad to meet you too. So, Otauto, is she from the academy? Naruto nodded. Yeah, and I'm hoping she might want to be friends. He turned to Hinata. Would that be okay? I'm not really close to anyone else in the academy, and you're really nice. Hinata had a major blush at this. He thinks I'm nice, and he wants to be friends. Oh, please let this not be a dream. That's sure, and Naruto-kun. I would like to be your friend. Naruto smiled as Iame and Tuchai to their orders. A few minutes later, they had their orders, plus plates to divide Hinata's lunch between them. Naruto sampled some of the food, and his eyes widened. This is incredible. Hinata, who made this? Hinata blushed, but it was a slightly lighter shade than usual. I did. Well, you're one heck of a cook. Hinata blushed more at the compliment, but smiled at Naruto's praise. It warmed her to hear it, especially coming from him. He smiled at her as he continued eating, but at a much more sedated pace than 2 years ago. You know, I think you and Lily Ni-chan are going to have some fun together. Why you have a sister? I mean, why you call a Iame-san Ni-chan? But you have a real sister. No, not a real sister, but she is very protective and fun to be around. And she is a cook herself. They both continued to eat and make small talk until it was time to head back. Naruto insisted on paying for the meal since Hinata hadn't planned on eating out. Then they headed back to the academy where they made it back into the classroom just as the bell rang. Aruka looked up at them. You are almost late, Naruto. Naruto smiled as he remembered a saying Gandalf had told him. He decided to use it now with his own twist. And Uzumaki is never late, Aruka-sensei. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to. With that, Naruto led Hinata back to their seats, leaving a slightly stunned Aruka and a giggling class behind him. Aruka shook his head as he held up the pop quizzes. I'm actually quite impressed with some of the quizzes here. We actually have two who did the best of all. Sakura Haruno got every answer correct. The pink-haired girl smiled as she stuck her tongue out at Ino. However, another student was able to find a hidden part of the test. Both Naruto Uzumaki was able to notice that questions 5 and 8 were both worded in such a way that they revealed a hidden message. That message revealed one of the greatest lessons any shinobi can learn: to see through deception. This pop quiz was more than a surprise test. It was a test of your ability to notice things that were out of place, crack a code, and see through deception. Good work, Naruto. You get extra credit. At that moment, there were several glares sent Naruto's way, mostly from Sasuke, the Sasuke fan club, and some of the guys, who weren't happy being shown up. Hinata smiled to herself though. Good job, and Naruto-kun. Now, we have some more to cover before you all join Mizuki for practice outside. In an undisclosed location, Mizuki kneeled and bowed before Danzu. I have bad news. Naruto Uzumaki is more formidable than we thought. He was able to see through a Jinjutsu I placed on his test and dispel it. Not only that, but he is more skilled than Sasuke Uchiha in almost everything, but academics. Danzu growled in annoyance. He must not graduate at the end of the year. If he does, he will be that much harder to control. Do everything you can to ensure he fails, and I will do what I can with the council. Mizuki nodded before leaving. Danzu sat back in his chair, in his office in his secret, underground root headquarters. I will not be denied what is mine this time. The Kyuubi will be mine to control, and used to take over Konoha, and then all of the elemental nations. After the academy, Naruto was leaning against the wall opposite the Hyuga compound. Hinata had gone inside to get her notes on the previous academy years, and then they would be heading to Naruto's home. He smiled, as he knew she would be expecting them to go to his old apartment. He couldn't wait to surprise her. He looked up as she exited the compound and smiled as she approached. You all set? She nodded and they headed off. Hinata couldn't believe it. She was with Naruto, about to train with him. She smiled happily at the thought of being with Naruto. Whether it was as friends, teammates, or more, she didn't care. All she knew was that for the first time in a while, she was happy, and apparently, she was making someone happy too. She suddenly noticed they were heading towards the Hokage monument. And Naruto-kun. Where are we going? To my home. My new one. It's on top of the monument. Hinata was confused, but didn't worry about it. 10 minutes later, she was gaping at the small mansion that was Naruto's home. He smiled as he opened the gate and let her in. Impressive, isn't it? It turns out this is actually my family's home. They died during the Kyuubi attack, and I was left alone. Nobody knew the truth about my heritage until it was discovered right before I left for my training trip. When I returned, the Sandaime gave it to me. Hinata turned to him. Did you find out why your parents were? Naruto nodded. I did. But for now at least, I can't tell you. And can you promise not to tell anyone about this place? For now, at least. Hinata nodded as Naruto opened the door. Hinata was immediately impressed. The home had obviously belonged to someone wealthy, but it was also simple and homely in its decor. She felt more at home here than in the Hyuga compound. As they left their sandals by the door, a figure about their height came out to greet them. Lily Ni-chan, I would like you to meet Hinata-chan, my friend at the academy. Hinata-chan, this is Lily Fairbairn, my unofficial Ni-chan. I met her during my travels. Lily smiled as she shook Hinata's hand. I'm happy to meet you. Any friend of Naruto's is a friend of mine. Hinata shyly nodded as she shook Lily's hand. Naruto smiled as he headed into the kitchen. Can I get you anything? Water, tea. Hinata followed him into the kitchen. Water would be nice. Naruto pulled out 2 water bottles from the fridge and handed her one. He then led her down into the dojo and into the library study. Hinata gasped as she looked over all the books. This is incredible, she said as she looked them all over. Naruto just smiled. If you see any you like, let me know. For now, I would like to see what you can do. Want to spar? Hinata slowly looked away. I don't know. I am not exactly a good fighter, she said softly. Naruto looked at Lily, who just nodded at him. Naruto sighed as he came over. Then let me help you become one. Spar with me, he said softly, lifting her chin. She blushed, but managed to keep conscious. She slowly nodded, before following Naruto to the practice mat. They both bowed to each other before Hinata took up the Juken stance and Naruto took up his own. Naruto nodded at her and she attacked, but she feared hurting Naruto, so she held back. Naruto easily swiped her strike aside with one hand. She continued, but Naruto dodged or blocked each of her attacks. Finally, she stopped, looking down in shame. I told you I'm not that good, she said, starting to cry. Suddenly, she felt 2 hands on her shoulders. She looked up to see Naruto giving her a warm smile. The problem is you're afraid to hurt me. You hold back so as not to hurt me, and thus I can block you easily. Then, you start to feel that you aren't that good, and that just hurts you worse. Hinata, I know you have a kind and gentle soul, but if you are going to be a ninja, you need to learn to fight. I want you to fight me again. And when you are fighting me, I want you to think about what or who you are fighting for. Come at me with everything you have. Okay? Hinata slowly nodded, and the 2 of them retook their positions. This time, Hinata started attacking faster and stronger. Naruto was still blocking, but was having a harder time. And then suddenly, one of the attacks got through, and Naruto took a hit to the arm. He stepped back, as Hinata continued her assault, caught up to realize what was going on. Eventually, they both stopped, panting. Naruto had gotten several good hits in, but Hinata hadn't done too bad. Naruto smiled at her as she stood there, panting hard. You see what you did. You actually got in quite a few good hits. He rubbed his arm, which was a little sore. Kyuubi was already healing him up though. Hinata slowly nodded as the realization came to her. She slowly began to smile as she felt confidence enter her. Maybe I'm not so weak after all. Naruto pored over the scroll in front of him, intent in his work. It had been 4 months since his return to the academy, and already things were looking up. He had quickly established himself as the new Rookie of the Year, as his performance in almost every category of the academy was outstanding. The only area he was weak in was genjutsu. He could dispel them, but beyond a few weak ones, he was unable to use them. Still, genjutsu was a subtle art, and not many could truly use it. Of course, his position had made him a target to some, specifically Sasuke Uchiha and his horde of fangirls. Sasuke was enraged that Naruto was outperforming him in every area. As an Uchiha, he deserved to be the best. As an avenger of his dead clan, he deserved the power Naruto had. He had begun following Naruto, trying to learn how he could get Naruto's power. He had also taken to challenging Naruto, doing his best to get the boy to fight, to re-establish his place as the best. Unless it was a spar at the academy, Naruto refused. And in the spars, Naruto continued to throw Sasuke around like a rag doll. Naruto found Hinata to be more of an opponent, because her Byakugan and Juken gave him problems, even if he blocked. Sasuke's fangirls were out for Naruto's blood. They hated the blonde for taking their idol's rightful place as the best in their class. Each day, there would be another attempt on Naruto by these fangirls, but each time, they were thwarted by Naruto's abilities, Hinata's Byakugan, and a few new friends. Naruto had gained a few more friends since the academy. Shino had enjoyed some logical and intellectual discussions with Naruto, who was actually fascinated with the bug colonies residing in Shino. Shikamaru had been interested in Naruto's intelligence as well, and had a discussion with the blonde. This led to a game of Go, in which Naruto almost beat the genius out. This of course led to a troublesome friendship, as Shikamaru put it. With Shikamaru came Choji, who quickly became friends with both Naruto and Lily. Naruto quickly found a use for one of the items he had gotten during his 6-month travel with Gandalf, Elroth, and Lily. Flashback. Here, I think you could put this to good use. Naruto handed Choji a battle axe he had collected from the glittering caves. It had a long handle with a pair of curved blades. This is a 3rd age dwarven steel battle axe, forged by master smiths long ago. Choji took the axe, slightly straining under its weight. Dwarven? You mean those short guys you told us about? Naruto had begun telling his friends about the history of Middle-earth before it became the elemental nations. It had come as a shock to them to learn that Lily was actually a 21-year-old. But to a hobbit, 21 was still considered a teenager. It was still funny to see some guys hit on Lily when they went out, seeing as how she was technically out of their age range. Flashback ends. Naruto smiled. Shortly after he had given Choji the battle axe, Chusa had come over to thank him for giving Choji a weapon that actually fit with some of the Akamichi fighting style. Already, Choji was working hard to get used to his new weapon, so that when he could, he would be able to use it to protect his friends. He turned his attention back to the scroll. Elroth had told him something that had caught his attention, and he was interested in finding out more. Flashback. Hinata and Naruto wrapped up another sparring session. Their friendship had proven invaluable to both of them. Hinata was slowly gaining more confidence in both her abilities as a kunoichi and confidence about herself as a girl. Lily had bonded with the girl, sharing her enjoyment in cooking and other things. Elroth had been standing nearby, watching the spar. He seemed to pay special attention to Hinata's fighting style. As Hinata left to head back home, he came over to Naruto. I think I know why Hinata has such a strong attunement towards magic. Naruto nodded, and Elroth continued. Her fighting style is very graceful, and the Byakugan has a few interesting characteristics, one of which is similar to the abilities of the elves, the ability to see great distance. Naruto wiped his forehead with a towel. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Elroth nodded. I think the reason the Hyuga clan has a high attunement to magic is because they are descendant from elves. Flashback ends. That was what Naruto was up to now. He was going over references to those elves who might have stayed behind, because they fell in love with a man or woman from the race of men. Naruto's own great ancestor was Arwen of Rivendell, the wife of Aragorn. Perhaps somewhere in the Hyuga's past, an elf had married one of their ancestors, and the Byakugan was born of chakra infusing with the DNA. But in order to be certain, he had to look into the Hyuga ancestry. He rolled the scroll up and looked at the clock. Damn, he shouted as he leapt up. He was almost late for a meeting with Hayashi, one that had taken all of Hinata's courage to set up. He raced out of the dojo, grabbing his coat as he went, and heading out the door. I'll be back. he shouted as he went. In the kitchen, both Elroth and Lily had been sharing tea. Did you see something? The green blur, and I heard a shout. But that was it. Lily went back to sipping her tea, while Elroth went over a recipe in front of him. Well, give it about 2 more weeks to age, and the ale we made should be ready. That alcohol they serve here is nothing but water if you ask me. Naruto quickly hopped down from jutting rock to jutting rock on the monument, before leaping off onto the roofs, and using his chakra, rushed from roof to roof towards the Hyuga compound. Hinata sat with her father, waiting for Naruto to appear. She wasn't sure what he had wanted to see her father about, but he stressed that it was very important. She gently brushed a wrinkle out of her kimono she wore, wishing she was in her bulky jacket. She didn't want Naruto to see her plain body in these clothes. There was a respectful knock at the study door. Hayashi merely looked up from the tea he had been sipping. Yes, the door was slid open, and one of the branch members kneeled and bowed. Your guest has arrived, Hayashi Dono. Hayashi nodded as Naruto entered and bowed to Hayashi and Hinata. Both of them returned the bow, and Hayashi indicated that Naruto should be seated. As Naruto sat down, Hinata poured him a cup of tea. Naruto thanked her and took a sip. He nodded appreciatively. This is excellent tea. Did you brew it, Hinata-san? Hinata nodded, not put off by the suffix. She knew Naruto was just being respectful in front of her father. Hayashi looked at Hinata. It appears cooking is at least something that Hinata is good at, he said. Hinata lowered her head, while Naruto felt anger claw at him inside. But he kept it under control, while Hayashi sipped his tea. Now, I believe you had something you wished to speak to me about. Naruto. Indeed, Hayashi-sama. I've been going over some records I gained while during my travels. You know that I have a special power that could quite possibly become a Kekkei Genkai. We won't know for sure until I have a child. However, I may not be the only one in the village with it. Hayashi raised an eyebrow. Indeed. And why do you come to me with this information? Naruto began to explain. My particular power at one time was something quite common amongst one of the old clans, before there were ninjas. However, that clan left the elemental nations, with a few exceptions. These people stayed, and married into other families and clans. It is quite possible that one of these people actually married one of the ancestors of your clan, and from his or her DNA, the Byakugan was born. Now, this other power might have eventually bled away, with each generation, until it became dormant. However, this ability might have awoken in Hinata-san. I have noticed that she seems particularly unique to your clan. Indeed, I have noticed that myself. Her hair color is unique, and her eyes are actually a shade of lavender, instead of white like the rest of us. But tell me, how do you intend to prove this theory of yours? Naruto took a deep breath. I wish to examine the ancestry of your clan. If I can find other incidents like Hinata-san's, or even pinpoint the founding ancestors of your clan, I will be able to verify if my suspicions are correct or not. And if they are, Hayashi asked, one of his eyebrows raised. What you ask is not simple. We Hyugas guard our ancestry almost as much as we guard our Kekkei Genkai. Naruto smiled. If I am correct, then I will teach Hinata how to harness this power and use it as her own. When she becomes proficient in it, she would be able to probably beat almost any member of the Hyuga clan. Of course it will take time, but it will be well worth it in the end. Hayashi sat back in silence. Truth be told, he didn't much care for the boy. He didn't see him as Kyuubi, since he had great faith in the Yondame's sealing abilities. But the fact was, this boy was a nameless, clanless orphan. If it wasn't for the fact that Hinata was useless, he would have told her to stay away from him. But the boy did have abilities that were powerful, since he used them to defeat Sasuke Uchiha. And if he could make Hinata less pathetic to the Hyuga name, who was he to stop him? I will grant your request, if both Hinata and another of my choosing are present to watch you as check over your theory. Hinata, go find Neji. Hinata bowed her head. Yes, Aru-san. She got up, bowed, and left. Naruto watched her for a second. She does look great. She has a better physique than any of the other girls her age. I wonder what makes her think she doesn't look that good. He turned back to his tea and sipped it. Hayashi regarded Naruto. Tell me, Uzumaki-san, what is your interest in my daughter? Naruto looked at him and answered honestly. She is a good friend to me. She helps me in areas I need, and I do the same for her. My intentions are to help her and be there for her if she needs me. Hayashi slowly nodded. And if this should become something more? Naruto looked him straight in the eye. If it should happen, I will guard her with my life and make sure no harm comes to her. And I would love her with every part of my soul. Hayashi was surprised. He was sure the boy would have said nothing would happen. Instead, he had claimed that if something arose, he would embrace it. Not something you usually say to a girl's father. He would have spoken, but Hinata and Neji entered that moment. Hinata barely had a blush under control, as she had heard what Naruto said. Naruto, meanwhile, looked the other person over. One word came to Naruto's mind. Arrogant. Neji was a spitting image of Hayashi if he was younger. He wore a white-colored jacket shirt with short sleeves and a high collar. He also wore a pair of dark blue shorts. His right arm and leg were wrapped in medical bandages, except for the fingers and foot. He had long brown hair held back in a loose ponytail. Over his forehead was a Konoha forehead protector that had black cloth to tie it on with, and 2 straps coming off it. He also had the white eyes of most Hyugas. Neji bowed. "You sent for me, Hayashi-sama." Hayashi nodded. "I did." "Neji, you are to accompany Uzumaki-san and Hinata. Uzumaki-san will be looking over our ancestry to see if a theory of his is correct. Make sure he looks at nothing else." Neji nodded. "This way, Uzumaki-san." "Hinata-sama." Naruto stiffened at the way Neji said sama, almost like an insult. He followed Neji towards the family library. He looked over many of the books and scrolls before pulling a few down. "These are the lineages of the Hyuga clan. This is all you may look at while here." Naruto nodded and opened one book. He looked through it before noticing a few discrepancies. "Hinata-chan, come here for a second." When Hinata came over, Naruto pointed some things out to her. "Look at these. This Hyuga died almost 200 years after they were born, of illness. And this one, 178 years, again of illness. And there are 4 more cases. Here, all of them living past 100, and all of them dying, not of battle or old age, but of illness." Hinata looked at him. "Does it mean something?" Naruto slowly nodded. "To me, it does. And here is something else. All of these Hyugas were in the branch family, even a few who were once main branch family." He slowly sat back. Hinata was a little confused. What does it have to do with what you are looking at for?" Naruto went back to work. "If I make the connection I'm trying to find, I'll tell you." He went back, going as early as he could. After an hour of searching, he found a pair of names and one of their children. Tanrei Hyuga. Hinata's eyes widened. HEW was the first Hyuga to have the Byakugan. "Yeah, but his dad is what I'm interested in." Valandil Alcarin. Neji came over, a slight smirk on his face. "And why does that interest you? He didn't pass his Kekkei Genkai." Naruto gave him a look before turning back to the scroll and writing a few things down on a notebook. "If it wasn't for him, you wouldn't have a Kekkei Genkai. It was his DNA, mixed with the chakra of his wife, that created the Byakugan and their son Tanrei. Alcarin is Hyuga in an old, almost completely dead language. This proves my theory." He moved back. Neji raised an eyebrow, much like Hayashi did. "So, what does this mean, exactly?" Naruto gave Hinata a smile. "It means that me and Hinata have the same power, and we need to start her training in how to use it." Hinata smiled, only for it to disappear as Neji scoffed. "Well, I'm sure that will be quite beneficial to her. Of course, a member of the main branch family should deserve such power." Naruto heard the ill-hid sarcasm and venom in Neji's voice. Under different circumstances, Naruto would have yelled at Neji and vowed to beat him into a pulp. Of course, that Naruto would have worn an orange jumpsuit and wouldn't even be there. That wasn't the Naruto who was present. He turned to Neji and gave him a hard look. "We're done here." He handed the books and scrolls back to Neji. "Thank you for helping us find these, Neji-san." "Of course, Uzumaki-san. The pleasure was mine." Neji gave them a mock bow as they left. Naruto slowly fumed at the arrogant Hyuga. What was his problem? He asked Hinata as they headed back to the greeting room, where they had met Hayashi. Hinata looked down, her face sad. "And Neji is my C cousin. He's part of the branch F family, and C considered a G genius of the Hyuga. W and IW was T3. His F father W was K killed in service to the main branch." Naruto understood in an instant. "He hates the main branch for it, doesn't he?" Hinata nodded as they returned to the room. Hayashi greeted them both neutrally as they sat back down. "Well, what did you discover?" Naruto pulled out the notes he had taken. "I discovered that one of the parents of the founder of your clan was indeed from the lost clan I spoke of. Hinata has the ability to harness the power I wield. With your permission, I would like to begin training her." Hayashi looked at him, then nodded. "Very well. You may train her. Since she obviously isn't going to be skilled in Juken, she might as well try to learn something useful." With that, he got up and left. Hinata looked down, shame filling her. She started to cry, until she felt a pair of arms wrap around her. She looked up to see Naruto was hugging her. "Don't you dare listen to him. He may be your biological parent, but no real father would ever treat their daughter like that." Hinata just leaned against Naruto and started crying into his chest. Naruto held her, giving what comfort he could. He looked up as the door opened to reveal a Hyuga woman with a strange green X-shaped seal on her forehead. She smiled at Naruto and bowed her head before leaving. After several minutes, Hinata managed to get her crying under control. She suddenly realized what was going on, and whose arms she was in. Her face flushed red, and with a loud eep, she leapt away, and started poking her fingers. Thank you, and Naruto-kun. She looked down, a small smile on her face. Naruto just nodded, before standing up, and holding out his hand. Well, shall we get started? He asked. Hinata looked at his hand, then took it. He pulled her to her feet, and led her to the hallway. Why don't you go get changed, and we'll go and start your training? Hinata nodded, and headed to her room. Naruto sighed as he leaned against a clear section of wall. Inside, he suddenly heard a roar of rage. I can't believe that bastard. Not even an orc is that cruel to their enemies. Kyuubi roared, his anger unmatched. Naruto turned inwards to him. I know, Kyuubi, but at the moment, there is nothing I can do except give her comfort and my help. He sighed as he looked down. Several minutes later, he looked up as he heard someone approaching. Hinata approached, her ninja outfit and coat on. She smiled shyly as they headed to the exit of the Hyuga compound. As they reached the gate, they ran into two older kids, both with headbands. One was a girl, wearing a pink Chinese sleeveless shirt and baggy, dark green pants. Her brown hair was done up in two buns, with her headband over her forehead. The other boy was incredible strange. He wore a green spandex bodysuit, with orange leg warmers and bandages around his forearms. His headband was around his waist, like a belt. But what was weird was his black hair was shaped like an upside-down bowl, and he had huge, bushy eyebrows. Also, he was currently huffing and straining, as he was doing push-ups with only his thumbs while in a handstand. 2,996, 2,997, 2,998, 2,999, 3,000. He dropped to his feet and started jogging in place while yelling to his companion. If I cannot jog in place until Neji arrives, then I will do 4,000 squat thrusts. And if I cannot do 4,000 squat thrusts, then I'll run 500 laps around Konoha. And if I cannot do that, I get it, Lee. Please shut up. The girl shouted at him, before huffing in frustration as she turned towards the gate, where she spotted Hinata and Naruto. Her eyes immediately went to the blonde, who she hadn't seen before, and they focused on the sword strapped at his side. She looked it over with a critical eye as she came over. Hinata, good to see you again. Who's your friend? Hinata bowed her head. Hello, Tenten. This is my friend, and Naruto Uzumaki. And Naruto, this I is Tenten, one of Neji Naisen's teammates. Naruto nodded as he held a hand out. Good to meet you. I'm glad to see only one person on your team has a stick up their butt. Tenten gave him a look, but it was gone before he could register it. That's an interesting sword. Can I see it? Naruto unsheathed the sword and held it in one hand. She gasped as she saw the blade. When she had seen the hilt, she had been curious, but figured that the blade wasn't anything special. How wrong she was. This is incredible. The way the steel is folded and the edges. If I didn't know any better, I would say this edge doesn't need to be sharpened at all. And the design of the sword would suggest that the blade's quality would be poorer than a regular katana, because of the way he would have to be folded and hammered during the forging process. But this metal was perfectly forged to give the blade maximum strength. Where did you get it? She looked up with stars in her eyes, which caused Naruto to have a huge sweat drop. Well, I picked it up in my travels, when I was away on a 2-year training trip. 2-year training trip. Almost immediately, the boy in green spandex appeared next to Tenten, his own eyes blazing with fire. Then you must have flames of youth to equal my own. Naruto now had a huge sweat drop that was actually weighing his head down. Thanks. Your name is Lee, right? Indeed. I am Rock Lee, the second green beast of Konoha. I am pleased to meet you. Lee quickly grabbed Naruto's hand and energetically shook it, while Tenten was almost drooling over his sword. Hinata giggled over the whole thing. Eventually, Naruto was able to wrest his hand from Lee's. He looked at Tenten, who had finally begun to get herself under control. So, I take it you know weapons. Tenten nodded vigorously. Yeah, I'm a weapons expert. Pretty much, I can hit any target with any weapon that can be thrown. Naruto nodded. Really? Well, I have a friend you might like to meet. Not only that, but I have a few other weapons I picked up in my trip. Maybe. He was cut off by Tenten in his face. Really? Can I see them? She shouted, her eyes wide, with a little drool coming off her mouth at the thought of more weapons like the sword. At that moment, a rather annoyed and arrogant voice came from the gate. Lee, Tenten, are you two done yet? The two stepped back sheepishly as Neji came over to them. He looked at Naruto and Hinata before mockingly bowing to them. I'm sorry if my teammates bothered you. We'll be going now. He turned and left, with Lee and Tenten following behind. Tenten turned and moused to Naruto later before turning back. Naruto sighed as he sheathed his sword. That was the weirdest pair of people I have ever seen. But they're better than Neji at least. He suddenly cringed and turned to Hinata. Sorry. Hinata smiled. It's okay, and Naruto-kun. Shall we go? Naruto nodded, and they headed towards the monument. Half an hour later, Naruto and Hinata were in the dojo study library, with Elroth standing in the doorway. Naruto pulled several books and scrolls he had added to his collection, and placed them in front of Hinata. Alright, time for me to completely explain things. Hinata-chan, the person whose name I found. Valendil. His name was an elvish one, which means your clan is descended from the elves of Middle-earth. Hinata just sat there. Why you mean the people who lived very long years, and were among the first races of this land. Naruto nodded. There are several indications. One is the Byakugan. You told me yourself that the Byakugan can see great distances with training. Elves could see great distances with their own eyes. Obviously, when chakra was introduced to this ability, it mutated the eyes, creating the Byakugan. Hinata gently touched her face near her eyes as Naruto continued. There are a few other indications. The entire Hyuga clan tends to look graceful, including their fighting style, something else elves were known for, and the elves were the fairest of beings in their physical appearance. Again, same could be said of your clan, although their cold demeanor tends to negate this. Hinata giggled slightly, and Naruto smiled. Lastly, elves were also known for their long hair. This tradition seems to live on in your clan, except for you. Hinata looked down. I feel like it's easier to manage this way. The truth was, Hinata didn't want to seem like a Sasuke fangirl. All of them wore their hair long, because it was said he liked long hair. Naruto just smiled. It doesn't matter. I think it looks fine however you have it. Hinata blushed, while Naruto continued. Now, the significance of all of this. Those names I pointed out to you. All those Hyugas had the same similarity. They all lived longer than a normal lifespan. Even if a shinobi should live to retire, no normal human can live much longer beyond 100. All of these Hyugas were almost twice that when they died. I would even bet that all of them shared characteristics with you. Naruto sighed, as he prepared to explain to Hinata something that could change her life. Hinata-chan. Another thing about the elves was the fact that they lived extremely long lives. Very long. As in, Elrond of Rivendell, one of the greatest elven leaders, was well over 6,000 years old before he left Middle-earth. And if I'm right about this, you may live that long as well. Hinata looked at him, shock on her face. Then her eyelids fluttered, before closing, as she fell over unconscious. Naruto looked at her, while Elroth came over. Well, I think she took it well, Elroth said, as he examined Hinata. Naruto sighed as he sat down on the floor. This is no laughing matter. She just learned that she could quite easily outlive everyone in her family, along with the children, and all of their descendants. True, but you didn't mention the fact that you will probably live just as long, even though your body will age more than hers. Naruto sighed as he sat back. Truth be told, I'm wondering if I should have kept the last bit there a secret. Elroth shook his head. No, if you kept it from her, it would just make it that much worse when she learned about it later on. Now, she has more time to adjust and deal with it accordingly. Naruto slowly nodded as he looked at Hinata. I just hope she can forgive me for telling her this. Half an hour later, Hinata began to stir as her eyelids fluttered. She slowly sat up, rubbing the back of her head. As she opened her eyes, her gaze landed on Naruto, who gave her a sad smile. I'm sorry, Hinata-chan. I know what I told you must have really upset you. I hope you are not too angry with me. He looked down, slightly ashamed. Hinata slowly shook her head. And no, don't worry. I am just as shocked, is all. I had no idea. Tears slowly began to fall down her eyes as she let it all sink in. If she survived being a shinobi, she was going to outlive everyone. Her father, sister, her clan, the whole village. She glanced at Naruto. Even him. She slowly pulled her knees to her chest as she felt a great despair settle over her. But Naruto's next words shocked her. You won't be alone, if that is what you are thinking. Her head shot up as he moved closer. I am in a similar position. The magic flowing through me ensures that my life will be extended as well. He sat next to her, not realizing the new hope that sprung up in her. She slowly looked down again, a small amount of relief in her heart. After a few moments, she looked up at Naruto. I don't know what to think. Is this a blessing or a curse? Naruto looked at the ceiling. In a way, both. You and we are cursed to see those we care about die while we live on. But we are also blessed. We can help so many. We can live to pass on knowledge, to aid those who need our help. to protect our home and our descendants. I won't lie, it will be hard to live past those we care about. But if we give in to despair, we cannot use this to help those who might need our aid. Hinata slowly nodded. I understand. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Naruto smiled, before his face turned grave. There is one last thing that is disturbing me. Those before you, who were like this, all of them should have lived much longer than they did. And yet, all of them died well before their time. And none of them died of battle or old age. They all died of illness. Hinata gave him a questioning look. What did you think happened? I'm not sure, but you might want to be careful, even in your home. Something is not right, and until I get to the bottom of it, you shouldn't tell anyone about what I've told you. But enough, we've dwelt too long upon this. It is time to start explaining what I plan to train you in. He pulled one of the scrolls over and opened it. Inside was the Elvish alphabet, along with several basics words and the kanjis of their translations. One of the two things you will be learning is Sindarin, the Elvish language. Most of my power comes not from myself, but my ability to call upon ancient spirits of the elements. Some of my abilities are of the power in me, but most are of me calling to these spirits to aid me. In order to do so, you must learn this language. Hinata took the scroll and looked it over. Then she looked as Naruto pulled another book over, but this was a taijutsu manual. Naruto opened the book and flipped through the different taijutsu styles. Elroth has noticed that your Jukin style of fighting is too stiff. It doesn't fit your strengths at all. You are a very flexible and acrobatic fighter, so your Jukin should match. He stopped at the taijutsu style labeled Snake. This taijutsu style would benefit you greatly, as the user must be very agile and flexible to use it. I want you to study it and adjust it for a Jukin fighter. If it doesn't fit, we'll try a different style. Hinata nodded as she took the scroll and book. Naruto helped her to her feet. Now, what I'm going to teach you in magic is entirely optional. If you don't want to, you don't have to learn it. It will give you a great edge in battle, as there is almost no one out there who would know how to fight against it. But it could take a few years to master it. Hinata looked at the information in her arms, and then she looked back up at Naruto, her eyes set in determination. I won't fail you, Naruto-kun. Naruto smiled. I never thought you would. And it seems the training has already taken effect. That's the second sentence you've said without stuttering. Hinata's eyes widened, and she blushed, but a smile crossed her face. She bowed her head. Thank you, and Naruto-sensei. Naruto smiled. Naruto-kun is just fine. Now, before you go, I need to add some security to those. He quickly took an ink brush and bottle from the desk and drew seals on both the book and scroll. He bit his thumb and added his blood to them before turning to her. Would you do the same, please? She nodded and bit her thumb as well. Once her blood was added, the seals absorbed both of their blood. Before Naruto placed his hands on the seals, he pumped chakra into them, and they both lit up before turning back to black. Naruto nodded in satisfaction. Those seals can only be opened by me or you now, and the seals also prevent anyone from using something, like Byakugan, to see them. Now, how about some tea and ramen? I'm pretty hungry right now. Hinata smiled and nodded as they headed back upstairs. That night, Naruto sat on the Hokage mountain right above his father's head. He was staring up at the stars above. As he watched them slowly move through the sky above, a figure moved towards him. He didn't even look away as he said, "You don't have to hide, Ni-chan." Lily came over and sat next to him. I didn't want to disturb you. You aren't. Silence fell over both of them before Naruto spoke again. Am I doing the right thing? What do you mean? I mean with Hinata-chan. It seems that all I've done now is completely changed her life and everything she has known. For all I know, I just destroyed her life for her. Lily sighed before smacking Naruto on the back of the head. He looked at her in surprise. What was that for? You may be one of the smartest people I know, but you can still be a real idiot sometimes. You haven't destroyed that girl's life. If anything, you have set her on the path towards a better one. Naruto looked at her questioningly, so she explained. When I first saw that girl, she had no confidence in herself at all. She would have just stumbled in life, never having enough courage to do anything, until she was either killed or thrown aside. Her life would have been miserable. You know what she told me? She said you were the first real friend she has ever had. Everyone else just treated her with neglect or scorn. Or they treated her with respect because of her position or clan. But you treated her like a person. You've given her confidence, friendship, support, and help. She thinks the world of you. She needs you. And unless I'm mistaken, you need her. Naruto tilted his head. What do you mean? I mean you need her as a friend too. Elroth is here to support you, but he's like a big brother or an uncle. I'm like your sister and mom rolled into one. But you need a friend. Someone who will stand by you, someone who will keep your secrets, make you laugh, get you into trouble, and out of it too. And maybe, in this case, one day be something more. Naruto smiled, as he understood what she meant. Thank you, Ni-chan. I really needed to hear that. Lily nodded as she smiled. Good, now come on back inside. You have academy tomorrow, and you need to rest up. Naruto got to his feet and took one last look at the stars. Hinata-chan, I won't abandon you. No matter what, we'll be friends till the end. Naruto smiled as he and Hinata entered the academy. It was the last few days of their last year. Soon, they would be taking the graduation test and finding out whether they passed or failed at becoming shinobi. Naruto slid the door open for Hinata, causing her to giggle slightly. In the 6 months since Naruto had started to train Hinata, things had definitely changed for the young Hyuga. Her stammer was pretty much non-existent, and while she still blushed around Naruto, she hadn't fainted in 5 months. She still clung to her baggy coat, but she had gained confidence in her kunoichi skills. And under Naruto's tutelage, she was quickly gaining a grasp of the Elvish language. She had already been able to pull off a few of the smaller and weaker spells. Her modified Jukin training was also going along well. As they entered the classroom, they were waved over by Chaoji. In the time since Naruto had given him the battle axe, Chaoji had actually concentrated on his training as much as he had concentrated on his love for food. He was quite adept in its use now, and had even combined it with one of the Akamichi's basic jutsus to create a very devastating combo. Kiba had joined the group of friends, seeing as how his hard work got him past Shikamaru, who now held the position of dead last. Honestly, the Nara boy didn't care at all. Once he made sure he wasn't dead last, Kiba decided it was too much trouble to try and pass Naruto up, since Naruto had passed everyone. So, he decided it would be better to learn from the best and be friends. Naruto had eagerly accepted him in, and brought him up to date with the others in the history of Middle-earth and his powers. Flashback. Kiba had just looked at him and in an odd voice said, "I'm glad I'm not fighting you." Naruto smiled. Well, I'm strong, but still, I have my weaknesses. He smiled at his friends, his comrades. He trusted them all with the truth about what he had been up to. He sighed, mentally battling about revealing one of his 2 final truths. He slowly nodded. There is something else I need to tell you all about. But you all have to promise that no matter what, you won't tell anyone else without mine or the Hokage's permission. They all looked at him in confusion, but nodded. Naruto sighed as he closed his eyes. I told you all about the evil known as Morgoth. But what you don't know is this. He escaped from his prison in spirit form and ran here to Middle-earth. The Council of Valinor sent hunting beasts after him. 9 of them. You all know them as the Biju. Everyone looked at Naruto in shock, or in Shino's case, his clan's version of shock. Naruto continued. These 9 hunting beasts were supposed to return Morgoth to his prison. But men didn't understand them, so they fought back. Eventually, the last of them to escape sealing, or not to go into hiding, followed a rumor that people who were allied with Morgoth lived here. This last Biju, Hyuin, attacked Konoha on October 10th, about 12 years ago. Shikamaru spoke up. You mean that the Kyuubi who attacked us was actually looking for this Morgoth? Naruto nodded. That's half of this secret there. The other half is this. When the Yondaime went to battle the Kyuubi, he wasn't able to kill him. Kyuubi's power, given to him by Iluvatar, or Kami, was too great. Instead, the Yondaime sealed Kyuubi inside the only thing that could hold and adapt to that much power. A newborn baby. Shikamaru, Shino, and Hinata all arrived on the same answer. Hinata looked at Naruto with tears in her eyes. Why you? The Yondaime sealed Kyuubi in you. Naruto nodded as he turned away. You all can leave. I wouldn't blame you. He suddenly felt a pair of arms wrap around him. He turned his head to see Hinata hugging him. She slowly looked up and smiled. Even if Kyuubi was an evil Biju, I wouldn't hate you. You're a hero. Kiba pretty much summed up what everyone else was thinking. Now I really don't want to fight you, because you would kick my butt from here to Suna. But can I ask you one thing? Naruto slowly nodded, and suddenly Kiba was at his feet, grabbing his leg. Please teach me how to have girls throwing themselves at me. Flashback ends. Naruto laughed to himself at the memory as he looked around that had embraced his position as dead last with his usual demeanor. Personally, he didn't care whose team he was on, as it would be such a drag. He did say that being on Naruto's team would at least be interesting. Shino had remained as he was. The only difference was now he would occasionally start a conversation, instead of replying if he was talked to. But he was otherwise the same. The group had taken over 2 rows of desk, one of the top back ones, and the row in front of it. This had quickly become their established territory of the classroom, where they sat and talked. Now, Naruto and Hinata took their seats in the back row and joined in the conversation. On the other side of the room, Sasuke Uchiha glared at the group. Specifically, he glared at Naruto. That blonde dope. He had just waltzed back into the classroom after disappearing and taken his rightful place. And then he refused to share his special power with him, an Uchiha. I deserve that power. I am an avenger. I need that power to avenge my clan and prove the superiority of the Uchiha. He sighed as he heard the usual entrance of his two mortal fears, Ino and Sakura. He laced his fingers together and put his chin on them, assuming his usual brooding position. Why can't they be more like that Hinata girl? At least she tries to be a kunoichi. I would consider asking for her to be my wife, except she is still so weak. He looked down as the two bickering banshees approached. Sakura looked at Sasuke and jumped at the seat closest to him, before sticking her tongue out at Ino. But as she turned away, she began wondering on Naruto's words. She had ignored them at first, but then she had seen Hinata slowly get stronger and stronger. She had kept training and pushing herself. Sakura turned to Sasuke. Sasuke-kun. Sasuke just grunted. Here we go again. I don't care how many times she asks, I'm not dating her. I was wondering. What do you look for in a girl? Sasuke was completely thrown off by the question, especially coming from one of his fangirls. He looked at her, then turned away. Well, that is the smartest thing you've asked me. Personally, I want a girl who's strong, so my children, when I rebuild the clan, are strong. That's all I really care about. Sakura looked at him, then looked back at Naruto. He was right. I ignored perfectly good advice that could have helped me. She sighed, before looking up, determined. All right then, I'll grow strong to win my Sasuke-kun's affection. Inside her mind, her inner personality punched the air. Cha, then we'll rub it in Ino Pig's face. Haruka and Mizuki walked into the room, causing everyone to quiet down. Mizuki wasn't happy at all. Orochimaru had asked Danzo for a gift, the forbidden scroll of Konoha, and Danzo had ordered Mizuki to steal it and deliver it to Orochimaru. Mizuki had planned on using Naruto to steal the scroll, assuming the boy would fail the genin test. Using the pretense that it would be an extra credit exam that would let him pass, he would lure Naruto out of the village, kill him, and take the scroll. But the boy was top of the class. While he wouldn't graduate as the rookie genin of his year group, he would still most likely graduate. I need to come up with a backup plan, he thought, as Haruka started the class. Good morning, everyone. Now, today, we will be going over what you need to know to pass the genin exams. I do expect a good portion of you will be able to pass. Now, the exam is two parts. The academic exam, which we will use to test your knowledge, and test of your ninja skills. To pass, you must show you know the substitution, transformation, and create 3 clones using the clone jutsu. And Naruto, I'm sorry, but you won't be able to use shadow clones, as the council has ruled that the shadow clone jutsu is too much for any genin, and therefore, not an acceptable clone jutsu for someone to use to pass the exam. Mizuki smiled as he saw a second chance to initiate his original plan. Sasuke smirked as he knew Naruto couldn't pull off a regular clone at all. Now you fail, Dobe, while I succeed. Hinata looked at Naruto with worry. She knew Naruto couldn't make a regular clone as his chakra reserves were too large, even with the control he had over it. But Naruto just gave her a smile. Don't worry, I'll pass. Haruka called the class forward to go over the transformation jutsu. They lined up, and one by one, performed it. Everyone was transforming into Haruka or Mizuki until they came to Naruto. With a smirk, Naruto disappeared in a cloud of smoke. When he reappeared, everyone gasped. Standing before them was a carbon copy of the Yondaime, except wearing larger versions of Naruto's green and black clothes. Everyone just gaped, and a couple suddenly began thinking overtime. That's weird. If you added whisker marks, I would say that was Naruto if he was an adult. But he can't be related to the Yondaime. Sakura thought. Oh my gosh, is this what Naruto will look like when he's older? What a hunk. Maybe I should. No. Bad Ino. You're in love with Sasuke-kun. Troublesome. But it does give me some thoughts. Naruto is an orphan, yet he lucked into a huge mansion. And he looks like a miniature Yondaime, except for the whisker marks. And Naruto-kun is hot. Hinata thought, a major blush on her face. She was pressing her fingers together again, as her thoughts turned towards a certain area. Unknown to her, an inner personality had formed over the months she had spent with Naruto. And that personality was having thoughts of her own. Oh yeah, we have a major hunk as our best friend. Now we just need to become more with him. The inner Hinata was yelling as she rushed to a wardrobe and began tearing through it. There has got to be something here to get his attention. Haruka nodded as he regained his composure. Excellent, Naruto. Hinata Hyuga. Hinata nodded, and suddenly a mischievous thought entered her mind. She remembered an illustration Naruto had shown her from one of the books she was studying from. She smiled as she also disappeared in a cloud of smoke. When it cleared, every guy in the room had a heart attack and a nosebleed, while every girl was instantly jealous. Hinata had transformed into a tall, graceful, older version of herself. Her hair was long, flowing to mid-back. She wore a white gown that was close to her body but didn't hug it. Her face was narrower and extremely beautiful, but what was interesting was her ears, which had become pointed. Holy shit, that's Hinata. Man, I should have gone for her sooner. Kiba yelled at himself as he wiped away a nosebleed. She's hot, and if that is who she will be when she is older, maybe I should take her as my own. It would really burn Naruto if I did. Sasuke thought with a smirk. She's incredible. In my life thus far, I never thought I would see anything as beautiful as this. Naruto thought softly, smiling at his best friend. Damn it, she's got every guy drooling over her. Even Sasuke-kun, and especially Naruto-kun. Wait, what did I just think? Ino mentally berated herself. Hinata just gave a small smile and turned back to normal. She looked around in surprise as half the guys in the class, including Iruka, were on the ground with nosebleeds. She turned to Naruto and shrugged. Naruto just smiled and leaned over. I think I'm rubbing off on you. Although, I was hard-pressed not to join them on the floor. Hinata blushed, but her smile remained. Finally, Iruka managed to stand to his feet, with paper towel stuffed up each nostril. I think we should move on now. He moved to the next student in line, who just simply did a rather bad transformation of Mizuki, giving him a long nose and really bad acne. Everyone laughed, except Mizuki, who had a rather large tick mark on his forehead. After that, they did an overall review of what they had learned in Iruka's lectures, before leaving for lunch. Naruto sprung for Chaoji's favorite BBQ place on the condition that Chaoji eat light. Chaoji agreed, especially since he was working on eating enough to gain muscle, instead of being overweight. Shino and Shikamaru all ate light, with Hinata slightly behind them. Naruto, Chaoji, and Kiba all ate heartily and Naruto drank from a hip flask. Kiba eyed it. Hey Naruto, what do you have in there? What, this? Oh, just a little drink Elroth and Lily concocted. When I was living with the hobbits, they introduced me to the world of beer and ale, all of which is alcohol, but most of which is a lot stronger than sake. This, however, is special. It has the same taste as ale, but it doesn't get you drunk or cause your liver to fail. Here, try it. Kiba looked at it, then took a swig. Almost immediately, he coughed, pounding his chest. He looked up, eyes watering, as Naruto took his flask back. What is that? Molten lava. Naruto shook his head. I had the same reaction. You need to drink it for a couple of months, and it gets better. Elroth and Lily were complaining about how the sake is little better than water, so they got to brewing. It's probably not as strong as dwarven quality though. With that, he placed the flask away. The waiter came over, giving Naruto a glare, before placing the bill down. Naruto looked at it, nodded, and paid for it, along with a generous tip, but not overly generous. The waiter looked at it, then looked up. Thank you. He picked up the whole bill and left, pocketing his tip. Maybe he was a demon brat, but he tipped good. Naruto sighed as he stood up. You all owe me lunch next time. Anyways, how do you all feel about the academy exam? Kiba smirked. Piece of cake. Troublesome. Shouldn't be too tough. I find it acceptable. I'm worried about you though, Naruto-kun. You can't do regular clones, and shadow clones were forbidden. Naruto gave her a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Hinata-chan. I have a plan. Truthfully, I think the exam is too easy. I mean, regular clones, transformation, and substitution. All those are basics that do almost no good in battle. I mean, in Suna, the shinobi are trained to at least know one C-rank jutsu, and one elemental jutsu before they graduate. In Kiri, well, from what I've heard, their graduation methods were extreme, but effective. I just really think the academy places more emphasis on the educational, and not as much on the practical. Everyone slowly nodded, and Kiba wholeheartedly agreed. Yeah, how is knowing about the history of our village going to save us against an enemy ninja? Don't get me wrong, that is important, but not so much that over half of our training should be taken up by it. I think that time spent in the academy could be better used. A quarter of the time used in academics, and then a quarter spent on each of the main focuses of ninjas, nin, gen, and taijutsu. Little did Naruto and his group realize that they were being watched by the Sandaime and his crystal ball. The formerly retired Hokage sat back, pondering Naruto's words. The boy does have a point. Few of our genin rarely make it past their first mission outside the walls. Most are killed, or don't have what it takes to be truly good shinobi. Perhaps I should speak to the council about altering the curriculum at the academy. Later that day, at the Hyuga compound, Hinata slowly slid her door closed behind her. It had been another tiring day at the academy, and tomorrow it would be her graduation tests. Hinata knew she could pass, and Naruto was obviously confident that he would too. But what about afterwards? Hinata couldn't bear the thought of not being on the same team as Naruto. He was everything to her. He gave her confidence, he gave her training, he gave her friendship. He made her smile, and in her heart, he made her feel like each day was the best ever. Hinata knew that she had strong feelings for him. When they first began at the academy, she had admired him. Then, a crush on him developed. She knew that was all she had, as she hadn't taken the time to really get to know him. But no, she knew so much about him, and she realized that he was the type of man she would want to be with forever. But she didn't think he felt the same way. And even if he did, her father didn't necessarily approve of him. Hinata sighed as she lay on her bed. For now, she would wait and see what the future held. There was a knock at the door, and she immediately sat up, straightening the wrinkles from her coat and pants. "Come in," she said. The door slid open, and one of the branch members entered. "Hinata-sama," the woman said, bowing. Hinata returned the bow. "Kyusai-san, what is it?" Kyusai slowly raised her head. "Your father requests your presence in the training courtyard." Hinata slowly nodded and stood to her feet. "Thank you. I will go to him immediately." A slight fear gripped her heart as Hinata made her way to the courtyard. She knew that she had a fight ahead of her, and that is what she feared. Usually, these fights were against Hanabi and led to her being humiliated, or against one of the branch members, which made her feel horrible as she wanted to help them, not hurt them. As she entered, her worst fears were confirmed. Hanabi stood there with her father. Hinata came and bowed to Hayashi. "Hinata, I wish to test how your training with Uzumaki-san is going. I understand you have been practicing on your taijutsu with him. Let us see if he has managed to make a difference in you." With that, he turned away, leaving Hinata to face Hanabi. Hanabi looked at Hinata with disinterest, while Hinata looked at her sadly. They both bowed before adopting their stances. Hanabi took up a standard Juken stance, while Hinata took up her modified snake Juken stance. They both looked at each other, and then Hanabi made the first move. She rushed at Hinata, throwing a palm strike at Hinata's chest. Hinata twisted to one side, her own counter-attack heading for Hanabi's neck. But she moved the attack away, missing completely. From then on, the fight became mostly one-sided. Hanabi was constantly attacking, while Hinata was dodging and blocking. She couldn't attack Hanabi. She knew in her heart that she could strike Hanabi easily, as her new Juken style gave her an edge. But she just couldn't do it. In the end, Hayashi ended the fight. He looked at Hinata with ill-hidden disgust. "Well, he at least taught you enough to dodge attacks. But apparently, you're unable to strike back. Not surprising." With that, he turned away and left. Hinata looked down at the floor, a few tears falling from her eyes. Suddenly, Hanabi moved in front of her. Why what, Imauto? Why didn't you hit me? You could have ended the match in one strike, right at the beginning. Why? Hinata looked at Hanabi, surprised that she had noticed her intentional miss. She closed her eyes. "I can't hurt you. I don't want to see you hurt. I know it makes me look weak, but I would rather be weak than hurt my Imauto." Hanabi just looked at her, confusion in her eyes, even if it meant earning Ado-san's approval. Hinata slowly turned away as she nodded. I have to go now." With that, she left, leaving behind a somewhat bewildered Hanabi. "Lee-chan is stronger than me, but she held back because she cares for me, even if it means having dad hate her. She seemed so strong because she lives with his hate, something I could never do." Hanabi turned away, changed from her thinking that she had held on to before the spar. In the ANBU Route HQ, Mizuki stood in front of Danzu. "I have watched over those you have asked me to. Naruto Uzumaki has proven his superiority to Sasuke Uchiha in all areas. If he had this training before he left, he would easily have been the 1-ranked rookie. As it stands, his combined grades place him slightly below the midway point in the rankings. Hinata Hyuga has grown stronger in his company, and is now the top-ranked kunoichi in most aspects. Sakura Haruno beats her in Jinjutsu and academics. Sasuke Uchiha is the second-ranked student of this year, and overall 1-rookie for his year group. He is also quite hungry for power, and is determined to avenge the destruction of his clan, and also taking Naruto down." Danzu nodded. "Good. We will have to keep our eye on the Hyuga and Uchiha. As for Naruto, he is sure to fail the exam now." Mizuki smiled as he eagerly nodded. "Indeed. Then I will use him to steal the Forbidden Scroll. After that, he will be arrested, and you can take him into Route, as you have planned." Danzu smirked as he sat back. "You have done well. Now go and prepare for tomorrow." Mizuki bowed his head and disappeared. Danzu turned to one of his operatives. "Sai, after Naruto fails the exam tomorrow, I want you to go capture his 2 companions. Bring them to me as well. but only if Naruto fails. Understand? A very pale-skinned boy, wearing effeminate-style clothes, gave Danzu his fake smile. Of course, Danzu-sama. With that, he disappeared as well. Danzu turned back to his desk. Now, we wait. The next day, about 40-some ninja hopefuls sat at their desks, waiting for the names to be called. They had already finished the academic exams, and those had been graded over lunch. The results would be made known after they passed or failed the ninjutsu exam. Iruka entered and looked at his clipboard. Aburame, Shino. Naruto and friends wished Shino luck as he left. He returned 10 minutes later, a blue-clothed Konoha headband around his forehead. He sat back down amongst the congratulations of his friends. The rest of the class continued to talk as they were called one by one. Most returned, wearing their new headbands, while others came back depressed, as they had failed one or the other of the exams. Hinata sat at her desk, her new headband around her neck, as Sasuke Uchiha was called. She glanced worriedly at Naruto, who just gave her that same confident smile. She smiled back. A few minutes later, Sasuke entered, his headband in place. All his fangirls shouted in joy and happiness, saying they knew he would pass for sure. Sasuke just smirked at Naruto as Iruka called out Uzumaki, Naruto. Good luck, dope. Try not to cry when you fail. Naruto looked at Sasuke as he passed and said, "Don't worry, team. Try not to fall over with that oversized ego of yours. You might hurt your pride, that which I've left you with." He exited the door and followed Iruka to an empty classroom. The desks were gone, and all that was left was a teacher's desk, which Mizuki sat at. On the table was one headband. Iruka sat behind the table and looked at Naruto. "All right, please use the transformation jutsu." Naruto nodded and transformed into Iruka, who smiled at the real Iruka and Mizuki. Then he turned back. Iruka nodded. "Good, good. Now, substitute yourself with coat rack." Naruto nodded, and in a poof of smoke, he was where the coat rack was, while the coat rack stood where he had been. He switched back as Iruka nodded. "All right, last, we need 3 clones." Naruto paused for a moment. "Does any type of clone, except shadow clone, work?" Iruka nodded. "Yes, any type but shadow clone." Naruto smiled. "Good." He closed his eyes, muttering in a foreign language under his breath. Both the ninjas looked at him before 3 copies of Naruto suddenly came into existence. Naruto smiled as he looked up, and so did the 3 clones. "Does this work?" all 4 of them asked. Iruka nodded. "Indeed. I'm not sure what that technique is, but it is a clone jutsu. You pass on both exams, Naruto." Naruto smiled as he picked up his headband and turned to the clones. He nodded, and they disappeared. He left, leaving a smiling Iruka and an angry Mizuki. "Damn, now I will have to use my other plan. At least Naruto will still be blamed for it." Naruto entered the regular classroom, the headband in hand. He smirked as he held up, getting cheers from his friends and surprised looks from everyone else. As he passed Sasuke, he couldn't resist one last remark. "Don't cry, Sasuke. You can't be right all the time." Hinata hugged him as he joined his friends, who all crowded around him. "How did you do it?" Kiba asked. "You don't know any clones but shadow clones." "True, at least not ninja-style clones. I used my magic to create illusions, just like a regular clone. They can't fight or do anything else except what I do, which means they are only really good for distractions or passing a slightly rigged exam." Every one of them, except Shino, laughed at Naruto's last remark before making plans to go train in one of the empty fields. That night, Naruto smiled as he sat above his father's head on the mountain. He had talked to his father about the exam and passing it. He also talked about the celebration afterwards, with Lily and Elroth joining them for a celebration dinner. Now, he was just enjoying the night air. He happened to glance down towards the Hokage Tower when a shadow moved along the building. He stood up and called to Kyuubi. "Did you see that?" "Yeah, but you're not going to like what it is." Kyuubi channeled some of his power to Naruto's eyes, and suddenly, the night became as clear as day. Naruto turned towards the shadow, and noticed his long-distance vision was better too. He could now identify the figure as himself. "Am I looking at me?" "Yes, you are." "That's what I thought." Naruto leapt down, heading after the shadow. Half an hour later, Mizuki appeared at Iruka's door. Iruka sleepily opened it, wondering what was going on. "Iruka, Naruto stole the forbidden scroll." He headed out towards the forest. "What? Why would he do that?" "I don't know, but the Hokage is sending everyone after him." Out in the forest, by a shack, Naruto sat and looked through the scroll. He stopped as Iruka appeared before him. "Oh, hi Iruka-sensei. Sorry, I was just busy looking up some cool techniques and stuff." "Really? And do you have permission to have the scroll?" Naruto chuckled as he rubbed his head. No, not really. See, his smile turned evil. I was going to give it to Orochimaru. With that, Naruto performed the shadow clone jutsu. 3 clones appeared and charged at Iruka. Iruka just grabbed the first and broke his neck. He turned, kicking another away, before throwing a kunai knife into his chest. The third got behind him and grabbed him while the real Naruto came at him with a knife. Iruka pushed up, driving the back of his head into the clone's face while his feet kicked the real Naruto away. The clones disappeared while the original fell on the ground. Iruka just smirked at him as he rubbed his chest. Nice try, Mizuki team. How did you know it was me? Naruto said as he turned into Mizuki. Because Iruka disappeared, I'm Naruto. Naruto stood there, his arms crossed, with a black cloth headband around his head. The tails of the headband draped down to his shoulders. Mizuki growled at him. Damn kid, at least now I can frame you for taking the scroll and bring you in. Naruto shook his head. I don't think so. Look behind you. Mizuki turned, only to see Hiruzen Sarutobi standing there. The old man smiled, before poofing out of existence. Naruto smirked. By now, the Hokage knows everything. So, you're screwed. Mizuki roared as he charged. At least I'll kill you. Naruto just ducked, driving one of his metal-studded gloves into Mizuki's side, before delivering a right hook. Mizuki fell back on his butt, rubbing his jaw. Naruto shook his head. Is that the best you've got? Mizuki glared at him, before smiling evilly. Do you know why the village hates you? Naruto internally rolled his eyes. Do tell. It's because the Yondaime didn't kill Kyuubi. Instead, he sealed it inside a human child. You're the Kyuubi no Kitsune who attacked Konoha. Mizuki smiled, thinking Naruto would break down. Instead, Naruto sighed as he rubbed his forehead. It's the stupid arrogance and idiocy of people like you that makes me hated in this village. I've known about Kyuubi for 3 years now. I've been friends with him for almost that long as well. And believe me, you shouldn't believe what you only have one side of. But that doesn't matter. You have broken a law of Konoha, which the punishment for this particular law is death. Naruto unsheathed the broadsword from his side and held it in front of him in a warrior's salute. Mizuki growled and grabbed one of the giant shurikens from his back. He got it spinning and launched it at Naruto. Naruto simply parried the spinning weapon to one side, causing it to crash into the ground. There was a huge gash in it where the sword had cut the weapon. Naruto smiled as he got back into his ready position. Is that it? Mizuki growled before making more shadow clones. They all charged at Naruto, who jumped back into a tree. Mizuki smirked at Naruto. Coward, fight me like a real shinobi. Naruto lowered his head in mocking despair. You idiot. A real shinobi doesn't fight hand to hand like this. Suddenly, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. The blade of his sword tickled Mizuki's throat. He attacks from the shadows. With that, Naruto bashed the back of Mizuki's head with his sword hilt. All the Mizukis disappeared as the original fell unconscious. Naruto sighed as he slung the forbidden scroll onto his back, then created a pair of shadow clones. They both picked Mizuki up, and the 3 of them headed back into town. 2 hours later, Danzu internally smirked as he headed for the council chambers. By now, Mizuki, who had stolen the scroll with his help, was gone, and Naruto would be waiting to be stripped of his genin rank. Then he would take him into route. However, as he entered the room, a surprise met his eyes. Sarutobi sat at the head of the table, with Naruto standing next to him, his arm resting on one end of the scroll. Mizuki was being held in shackles between 2 ANBU members. Danzu sat down as Sarutobi nodded. Now that we are all here, let us begin. 2 hours ago, the Forbidden Scroll was stolen. Originally, it was thought that Naruto Uzumaki was the culprit. However, we have eyewitness accounts from Elroth and Lily, who saw Naruto up until a minute before the scroll was stolen. Also, using the Shadow Clone Jutsu, I was able to witness Mizuki confess to stealing it to frame Naruto, and that he also attacked Naruto, and broke my law concerning Naruto. The council members all looked at each. Danzu cursed to himself. Considering Naruto was standing there with the Forbidden Scroll, there was no way to refute this claim. He just sighed, as he went over who he could use to silence Mizuki before too much information was revealed. Sarutobi smiled, as no council members tried to refute his explanation of the night's events. He turned to Naruto. Thank you for returning the scroll. This will be marked as a ranked mission, and you will receive pay for it tomorrow. In the meantime, you may return home. Naruto bowed, handed the scroll to an ANBU, and left. Danzu glared at Naruto as he left. One day, you will be my weapon. I will not be denied. Naruto and Elroth headed down towards the Hokage Tower. Naruto was getting his shinobi ID, while Elroth was planning on registering in the village as a shinobi. His intent was to be assigned to Naruto's team, and protect him as Gandalf said he should. Naruto had said they could talk to Sarutobi about it, but to not get his hopes up. Naruto smirked and decided to take the quick way to the Hokage's office instead of having to deal with a bunch of bigoted idiots. He quickly climbed up the wall of the tower using chakra and slid through an open window. "Hey Oji-san." Sarutobi looked at Naruto in surprise. "What? Naruto, how did you get in here?" Naruto pointed at the window. The Sandaime just nodded as Elroth came in through the door. Sarutobi looked at the Dunedain Ranger. "So, what can I do for the two of you?" Naruto nodded towards Elroth. He wanted to get registered as a shinobi of the village. Sarutobi looked at him. "Indeed. Well, any idea on what his ranking would be?" Naruto looked Elroth over before turning back to him. "Special Chunin. His tracking, stealth, and close quarters are all excellent. He is a skilled medic, and while he has no ninjutsu or genjutsu, he does have magic of his own to use." Sarutobi smiled. "This actually works into my plans. If Elroth agrees, that is. Well, I would like to test him against a couple of our Chunin. After that, if he makes the cut, I'll make him a special Chunin. I'll call the two Chunin now. In the meantime, you should go get registered, Naruto." Naruto nodded and left Elroth. He headed to a small office where he filled out the necessary papers. Afterwards, he waited to get his photo for his ID. When the time came, he headed to the roof where an old man stood by with his tripod camera. The old man looked him over as Naruto took the seat in front of the backdrop. "Alright, so what are you going to do? Sigh, victory sign, brood, squeal like a fangirl. I've seen them all." Naruto just gave him an understanding look. Must have been tough doing this with overexcited kids. "Don't worry, I'll just sit here." The old man gave him a surprised look before getting ready. Naruto sat there, a regular smile on his face as the camera went off. The old man came out. "Well, that was normal." Naruto nodded. "That picture will be part of what identifies me as a ninja of this village. I want to look good for those who will see me as a representative of my village." 45 minutes later, Naruto was sitting before the Hokage and Iruka to finalize his registration. Sarutobi nodded at the picture. "Very good. Truth be told, if you hadn't gone on your training trip, I bet you would have painted yourself up and struck what you thought was an imposing pose." Naruto nodded. "That seems like the old me. Anyways, how did Elroth do?" Sarutobi pulled his hat down low, almost as if he was ashamed of what had happened. He hid from both Chunin for 20 minutes before ambushing them and taking them down in less than one. He passed. "I've assigned him to work alongside one of the rookie Jounin senseis this year to help them get the ropes." Naruto nodded, only for the door to suddenly bang open, and a young kid in a yellow shirt, dark shorts, a blue scarf, and a helmet came charging in. "Oji-san, I challenge you for the position of Hokage." He ran forward, a shuriken grasped in his fist. He didn't make it 3 steps before he tripped on his scarf and fell on his face. Sarutobi and Naruto just stared at the boy. "That's the 9th time this week. What is Abisu doing?" The boy jumped to his feet as a man entered. This man wore a headband that covered the top of his head, a pair of sunglasses, and the standard Jounin outfit of dark blue pants and long-sleeved shirt. The man gasped as he found he boy. "Honorable grandson, are you alright?" The little boy looked around before he saw Naruto. "Hey, you tripped me. I would have gotten Oji-san if you hadn't have tripped me." Naruto just rubbed his head. "I'm sorry, but you are mistaken. You tripped on your scarf." The boy crossed his arms. "Don't lie. I am Konohamaru, the grandson of the Sandaime Hokage." Meanwhile, the Jounin looked at Naruto with disdain. "It's the demon boy." Naruto slowly stood up. "I am honored to meet you, but do not think that your title protects you. If I was someone who could not keep their calm, I would have most likely punched you no matter who you are. If that is all, good day, Hokage-sama." Sarutobi nodded as Naruto left. The Jounin sighed before looking down. "Come, honorable grandson, we must get back to your training. And where is he?" Sarutobi just smirked slightly. He went after Naruto, Abisu. The Jounin paled before turning and running. Meanwhile, Naruto sighed as he detected Konohamaru's pitiful attempts at stealth. He stopped in an alley and turned to see Konohamaru trying to hide behind a camouflage blanket. It would have worked, except for the blanket, which looked like the fence was held sideways. "I can see you there. Come out, please." Konohamaru came out. "I knew you were strong, since you were able to threaten me in front of my granddad, and he didn't do anything." Naruto just sighed. "Can I help you?" Konohamaru took a step forward before throwing himself at Naruto's feet. "Teach me, please." Naruto sighed again as he rubbed his forehead through his black-clothed headband. "Don't you have a teacher? That Jounin who came looking for you." Konohamaru looked away in frustration. "He says he can help me become Hokage. He says he knows all these shortcuts to power and..." Naruto stopped him. I'll train you. Just promise to never take a shortcut to power again. First, I need to ask a few questions. Do you know how to use chakra? As Konohamaru nodded, Naruto continued. Do you know any techniques? Konohamaru thought for a moment. I can use the transformation jutsu. He put his hands in the ram seal and disappeared in smoke. He reappeared as a horribly fat and short version of Naruto. Naruto's eyebrow twitched before he settled down. His control is horrible. Well, I'm going to train you in chakra control. Do you have any kunai? Konohamaru shook his head. Naruto just smiled. We need to get you one. Come with me. They headed to the nearest shop. It was actually a weapon shop, blacksmith. Naruto entered, with Konohamaru behind him. The owner looked up and growled in annoyance. What are you doing here? Naruto gave him a look. I'm here as a customer. I don't serve people like you. Clear out. Naruto sighed as he created a shadow clone. The clone nodded and left while Naruto picked a kunai up and handed it to Konohamaru. Here, it's on me. Konohamaru smiled and took the knife, examining it. The shop owner yelled as he came out from behind his counter. Hey, I said clear out. At that moment, 4ANBU appeared and grabbed the shop owner. Sir, you have broken the law concerning the sales of products to shinobi. You are under arrest and sentenced to 5 years forced labor. The shopkeeper was yelling at the ANBU, who just dragged him out of the building. 2 of them carried him away to the prison, while 2 others stayed. They turned and bowed to Naruto. This building and all its contents are yours, Uzumaki-san. Naruto nodded. I'm going to remove all the weapons and whatever else I can use. You can give the building to the village and everything else to be sold to someone else. With that, he stepped out with Konohamaru. The ANBU stood by as Naruto created 100 shadow clones. They entered the building, stripped it clean of the weapons, the forge and its tools, all the raw materials, and everything else useful. Then, they left, heading back to Naruto's home. Naruto just turned to Konohamaru. Shall we? Konohamaru stared at him in awe as they headed to a training field. There, Naruto turned back to Konohamaru. Okay, I'm going to teach you the tree walking exercise. It's a chakra control exercise that also helps you in general. Now, what you need to do is channel chakra to your feet. You need to keep it there and then do this. Naruto turned and walked up the tree. He hung upside down from a branch and smiled at Konohamaru. You see, Konohamaru nodded eagerly as Naruto dropped to the ground. Alright, I want you to try. Use the kunai to mark how high you go and then try to beat it. Just be careful. Too much chakra, you get blown off. Too little and you slip off. Now, I blunted the knife, but still, be careful. Konohamaru nodded and got to work. He channeled his chakra, then rushed the tree. He got up 2 steps and slid off, hitting his head. Naruto just shook his head. Try a little more chakra. They kept going for the next hour. Suddenly, Abisu appeared, staring at Naruto in disdain. What is going on here? Konohamaru smiled as he panted a bit. Naruto Nai-san has been teaching me the tree walking exercise. See, Konohamaru managed to get over halfway up the tree before having to turn and run down. He smiled even more, and it has really helped. Look, Konohamaru turned into a mostly accurate version of Abisu. The Jounin looked intrigued. Really, this is indeed remarkable. But tell me, what did the Naruto-san ask for in return? Naruto looked him in the sunglasses. I told him to not take shortcuts to power. If you have power with no experience, you become corrupt or spoiled. True power comes from hard work. Abisu gaped a bit. What do you mean? Naruto sighed before making his favorite hand sign. 50 Narutos appeared around him. I learned this technique and a little over 20 other jutsus through blood, sweat, and hard work. That is true power. Naruto turned to Konohamaru and kneeled in front of him. Konohamaru, you told me that you want to be Hokage, so people will stop calling you honorable grandson and respect you. But know this, that is not what being Hokage is about. It's about being willing to protect this village, no matter what. Even if you have to give up your own life. If you are willing to work hard and give your all to protect others, then you will become Hokage one day. With that, he got up and ruffled Konohamaru's hair. Good luck. With that, he left. Konohamaru sighed as he leaned against the tree. Suddenly, Abisu appeared in front of him. Konohamaru-san, we have work to do. You'll never be Hokage sitting here like this. Konohamaru smiled as he nodded. Thanks, Naruto Nai-san. Sarutobi smiled as he looked through his crystal ball. Good work, Naruto. You are proving to be quite the leader. Who knows what the future holds for you? The academy next day. Naruto and his friends sat at their desks, eagerly chatting. Kiba brought up the subject of teams. Who do you guys want to be teamed up with? Chaoji shrugged. Shikamaru. As long as I'm with him, I don't care that much. Shikamaru sighed from his place with his head on the desk. Same here. I just hope I don't get Ino or Sakura. Shino gave a noncommittal shrug. I have no problems with any team members, though I would prefer Naruto, Hinata, or Shikamaru. Naruto smiled. As long as I'm not with Sasuke or any of his fangirls, I'm good. Though, I do have a preference on one of my teammates, Naruto said, glancing at Hinata. She blushed, but gave him a smile back. Kiba sighed. I bet Hinata feels the same way, right? Well, I would hate to be on the same team as the Emo Prince. Anyone else, I don't mind. Meanwhile, several Jounin and Iruka watched the students throw Sarutobai's crystal ball. Sarutobai looked up at them. So, any last-minute changes to the teams? One Jounin, with gravity-defying silver hair and his headband at an angle over his left eye, closed the orange book he was reading. I would like to transfer Kiba and Yuzuka for Naruto Uzumaki. I believe he's better suited for my team. Another Jounin, a woman with dark red eyes and long back hair, stepped forward. She was wearing what looked like white patterned bandages as a dress, with a red sleeve on the right arm. She also had medical tape wrapped around both of her forearms and hands, but the fingers were exposed. She shook her head at Kakashi. That book of yours has rotted your brain, Kakashi. Anyone with half an eye can see that Naruto and Sasuke would never get along. The teamwork on the team would be abysmal, and they would fall apart. Naruto should be on my team, as he would work well with Hinata and Shino. Besides, Naruto would just overpower your team, since he's shown he's more skilled and powerful than the Uchiha. Kakashi Hadake, the famed copycat ninja, just glanced at the woman Jounin. You're a rookie sensei, Kurenai. You don't know how well they would work. Besides, Naruto is obviously a ninjutsu and taijutsu expert. What could you teach him, O famed Jinjutsu mistress? Your team is supposed to be geared for tracking, which is why Kiba is better. Kurenai Yugi opened her mouth to retort, only to be stopped by another voice from the back of the room. Naruto is just as skilled in tracking as he is ninjutsu and taijutsu, and who better to help him deal with his weakness of Jinjutsu than the Jinjutsu mistress of Konoha. Besides, this will help balance the teams. Elroth stepped out of the shadows he was in, before continuing. If Naruto is on your team, you will have a team geared primarily as a powerhouse team, but with no ability to track or detect ambushes. Kurenai's team could be an unparalleled tracking team, but with no ability to fight or do damage. This way, both teams can track, detect, and fight. Another Jounin, with a cigarette in his mouth, nodded. It makes sense. I mean, my team is geared after their parents. One captures, one can read minds and control them, and one can beat the hell out of people. Fairly well balanced. Kakashi glared back at the smoking Jounin. This isn't your business, Asuma. Or yours, whoever you are. I'm Elroth, son of Irondil. I am a special chunin of the village, and I'm assigned to aid Kurenai since she is a rookie sensei. I'm also one of Naruto's teachers from his training trip, and I'm teaching him Hinata Hyuga and Shino Aburame, as well as Choji Akamichi, Shikamaru Nara, and Kiba and Yuzuka advanced stealth and tracking techniques. Sarutobai held a hand up. Enough. Kakashi, I understand your reasoning. If Naruto was on Team 7, you could possibly train a team to rival the Sannin. But as Kurenai pointed out, there is no teamwork between him and Sasuke, and barely any between him and Sakura Haruno. I would rather have two excellent teams than one perfect team that could end in disaster. Naruto will not be transferred. Any other requests? No one spoke up, so Sarutobai nodded to Iruka, who left. Kakashi sighed as he pulled his book out. Well, at least I can train Sasuke. I'll make him strong for you, Abido. The class was joking around or talking to their friends when Iruka walked in. They all quieted down as Iruka smiled at them. I just want you all to know I'm extremely proud of all of you. You've all done well and graduated as Genin of Konoha. But the journey only becomes harder from here. You all now have the responsibility to protect and serve this village. Be strong and trust in your teammates. With that, he began reading off the teams and their senseis. Hinata sat there, her hands clenched as name after name was read off. Team 7 members are Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno. There was a shout of victory here from the pink-haired Kunoichi and Kiba and Yuzuka. Your Jounin sensei is Kakashi Hadake. Kiba banged his head on the desk, startling Akamaru, who was napping. Naruto patted his friend on the back. Sorry man, don't worry, you can still come and train with us when you have free time. Team 8 members are Shino Aburame, Hinata Hyuga, and Hinata had her fingers crossed. And Naruto was on the edge of his seat, Naruto Uzumaki. Your sensei is Kurenai Yuuhi. Hinata let off a sigh of relief before Naruto hugged her. Shino gave them both a nod. Team 9 is still active. Team 10 is Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Chaoji Akamichi. Your sensei is Asuma Sarutobai. Ino banged her head on the desk. I am with the human vacuum and the lazy baka. Why couldn't I have Sasuke-kun? Or even Naruto-kun? Gah, stop it. Your Jounin senseis will be here after lunch to pick you. Until then, good luck. With that, the class was dismissed. Naruto gathered his friends together. How about one last lunch together? Who knows when we'll be able to again? They all agreed, only to find Ino blocking their path. I'm coming. I'm going to need to get used to these two if I'm going to be teamed up with them. Naruto just shrugged. Fine, but no praising Sasuke or anything like that. Got it. We're here as friends, so we are going to talk about stuff other than Sasuke. Ino gave out a frustrated nod. Fine, fine. Sakura turned to Sasuke. So, do you want to go get something to eat, so we can get to know more about each other? Sasuke looked at her and turned away. No. With that, he left. Sakura looked down. Then she turned back to watch the others leave. She thought for a few moments, then stood up and followed them. Naruto stopped and watched her approach. Can we help you? He asked her simply. She looked down, playing with the hem of the red Chinese dress top she wore. See, can I come with you guys? I don't feel like being alone right now. Naruto thought for a few minutes, then looked at the others. They all shrugged, and Naruto nodded to Sakura. Sure, just no obsessed talk about Sasuke. Okay, Sakura nodded as she followed them. Meanwhile, in the Konoha prison, Ibiki Morino stared at Mizuki, who was tied up to chakra draining wire with a seal on the ground that prevented him from molding his chakra. The scarred, special Jounin took pride in his work as head of the ANBU interrogation unit. He was a huge man, with scars and wounds all over his face and hidden under his ANBU clothing, huge black coat, and black gloves. His headband was tied in a black bandana over his head, hiding some of his worst scars. He turned to his second-in-command, Special Jounin Anko Midarashi. The young woman had short purple hair done in a spiky ponytail. She wore a mesh shirt, short tan skirt, and a tan coat similar to Ibiki's, but shorter. She also had a pair of shin guards. Anything from him? Anko just gave him a somewhat sadistic smile. Nope, but I haven't used the best techniques yet. Give me about 5 minutes and he'll be singing like a bird. Mizuki looked up as Anko held her hands out. Snakes uncoiled themselves from inside the sleeve. The snake's eyes fixed on Mizuki, and they started to head for him, their fangs bared, until Mizuki cried out. All right, I'll talk. The snakes retracted, and Anko had an almost disappointed look. Mizuki sighed in relief before he started to talk. I was stealing the scroll for Orochimaru, who promised me power. Power I deserve, since I wasn't promoted to Jounin. Anko stiffened at the mention of Orochimaru, and Ibiki nodded to Mizuki. The Chunin continued. Orochimaru wanted the forbidden scroll so he could learn from it. He intends to attack Konoha, but I don't know anything about it. Ibiki nodded, and he and Anko left the room. Ibiki turned to the nearest ANBU and handed him a scroll containing the information he had been copying down. Take this information to Hokage-sama. The ANBU nodded and disappeared. Inside the holding cell, Mizuki's head was hung in defeat, but he looked up as a katana blade touched his throat. A dark figure, covered in black, stood before him. You did well not to reveal anything about Danzu-sama, but I'm afraid he doesn't leave loose ends. With that, he stabbed Mizuki through the heart. The assassin cleaned his blade and disappeared. The Hokage looked over the information given to him, his heart heavy. He sighed as he looked up at the ANBU team gathered in front of him. I need the 4 of you to go to the new village, Otagakure no Sato, in Rice Country. Bring back everything you can find. The ANBU nodded and left. Sarutobi sighed again as he turned to look out the windows of his office. My student, what did I do wrong? Meanwhile, the students had regathered at the academy to meet their senseis. Naruto was actually surprised that Sakura had taken his advice and was training hard. He hoped Ino would do the same, as both of them could be rather talented if they put their minds to it. He stopped his musings as the door opened and a woman Jounin entered. She looked over the class. Teammate, follow me. With that, she turned and left. Naruto, Hinata, and Shino followed, waving goodbye to their friends. They followed Kurenai, who led them to one of the training fields. She stopped and told them to sit. All right, I'm Kurenai Yuyuhi, the Jinjutsu mistress of Konoha. I'm your team's sensei. Now, why don't we all introduce ourselves? You know my name. I like being with my friend Anko, Dango, and men who aren't perverse. perverts. I hate perverts and those who think women can't be good ninjas. My hobbies are training, reading, and taking walks through the park. My dream is something personal, but I'll tell you if you earn my trust on that level. Now you, she said, pointing to Shino. I am Shino Aburame. I like my friends and bugs. I dislike people who are cruel to others or shun them without really knowing them. I also don't like those who hurt bugs. My hobbies are collecting bugs. My dream is to become the head of the Aburame clan, and to collect one of every type of bug. Kurenai nodded, then pointed to Hinata while giving her a small smile. She had been the girl's unofficial mother ever since her real mom had died. Hinata bowed her head. I am Hinata Hyuga. I like my friends, especially Naruto-kun. I dislike those who are cruel to others and shun people for something they had no control over. My hobbies are training with my friends and flower pressing. My dream is to change the way of my clan, and hopefully one day be close to someone special to me. She finished with a blush on her face. Naruto himself had a small blush as well. Kurenai just smiled. The confidence she has gained is amazing. Alright, now your turn. Naruto nodded. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, the Wizard of Kitsune, and Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. And they know about it, Kurenai-sensei, he said, as he noticed the alarmed look on her face. She glanced at both Hinata and Shino, who simply nodded. Kurenai smiled. Well, that's one less problem. Continue. I like my friends, especially my best friend, Hinata-chan. I also like training, ramen, and learning. I dislike people who are cruel to those who have something they had no choice in receiving, and arrogant teams who believe they deserve everything because of their last name and clan. My hobbies are training with my friends or just hanging out with them, eating ramen, and learning new things. And my dream is not a dream, but a goal. I will protect everyone who is precious to me, and this village, no matter what. Now, why doesn't Elroth show himself? Elroth shook his head as he stepped out from his cover. I was going easy, Naruto. Anyways, I'm Elroth, son of Erendil. I'm Kurenai's assistant for this team. As they all smiled at Elroth, Kurenai nodded to them. Well, I must say I am impressed with all of you. Now, I know you all think you are genin now, but truth is, there is a final test. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. Test? What test? Kurenai smiled. A test to truly determine your abilities. But not until tomorrow. Meet me here tomorrow at 9 o'clock. With that, she disappeared. Hinata and Shino looked at Naruto. What now? Now, we train. More than likely, it will be a test of our teamwork, more than anything. But we need to be prepared for the unexpected. With that, the three of them left, heading towards Naruto's home. Elroth sighed as he headed towards the direction Kurenai had gone. Meanwhile, Kurenai had appeared at a bar, where she knew Anko hung out. She stepped in to find Anko snacking on a plate of dango with a bottle of sake in front of her. Kurenai joined her. Hey, Anko. Kurenai-chan. So, how's the new team? Good. Too good. I can't give them a teamwork test, as their teamwork is already skilled. Anko chewed thoughtfully on a dango stick. Well, you could always just give them a test of their abilities. I know. How about have them track Kakashi's genin, and maybe even mess with his test? Kurenai stopped for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, and that would be the best way to get back at him. Huh? Anko said, the dango stick hanging from her mouth. Kurenai gave a frustrated sigh. He thinks my opinion doesn't matter since I'm just a rookie jounin. Anko just smirked. Then go for it. Kurenai nodded and took a dango stick from Anko's plate. Anko gave her a mock glare. If you were anyone else, you would be bleeding. Awa, I love you too, Anko, Kurenai said with a smirk. With that, she left, only to run into Elroth. She was still a little iffy that she had an assistant, but he explained he was mostly there to protect Naruto, and he wouldn't interfere with her training of them. She nodded to him, and began explaining what would happen the next day. Elroth just smirked. The next day, the Team 8 hopefuls met up in the field again. Each of them took a discreet look around, before sitting down. A few minutes later, Kurenai and Elroth arrived. Alright, now, to make sure you all have what it takes to be genin, the senseis give each team a test to determine if you have what it takes. These tests have a 66% fail rate, so out of the 10 teams to pass, 3 teams will certainly pass. Now, my test for all of you is simple. This team's test is to go to Training Ground 7, track the genin of Team 7, and if possible, disrupt their test. If you can track them without being detected by them, and possibly Kakashi, you pass. Naruto, Hinata, and Shino nodded before disappearing. Kurenai smirked as she and Elroth followed. At Training Ground 7, Tiba was not having a good day. His sensei had been 3 hours late to pick them up yesterday. He had then told them nothing but his name. His teammates were the Emo Prince and his fangirl. Although Sakura was getting better, Kakashi had told them about the genin test, how they should appear at 7 at their training ground, and not eat breakfast. Now it was 10 and he was starving. Finally, Kakashi appeared, smiling under the face mask he always wore. Sakura yelled at him, "You're late." "Sorry, a black cat crossed my path, so I had to take a longer route, and..." "Liar." Kakashi just sighed and put the alarm clock he was carrying on a stump. He pulled out 2 bells and tied them to his belt. "Well, your test 2 is take a bell off me. You have till noon to do so. Whoever fails will get tied to a post, not be given lunch, and will be sent back to the academy." At that, all of them stiffened. Kakashi smiled as his visible eye became U-shaped. "Now, you must come at me with the intent to kill. Otherwise, you will fail. Ready? Begin." With that, he 3 genin disappeared. Kakashi sighed as he looked around. "Well, they seem to have hiding down. But what I'm interested in is the other 3. Naruto sat on a branch a few feet behind Sasuke and above him. He mentally sighed as Sasuke was wide open to someone from behind. When hiding or facing multiple opponents, keep your back to something. Hinata was watching Sakura, who was crouched under a bush. She was a fair distance back, watching her with her Byakugan. Shino was watching Kiba, who was hiding behind a tree. He nodded as Kiba had his back against it while peeking around the corner. His back to the tree, meaning he is prepared to fight someone who might surprise him. He took Elroth's lessons to heart. Kakashi lounged against a stump and was reaching for his book when Kiba suddenly came flying at him with a kunai in hand. Lesson number 1, Taijutsu. Kakashi just sighed. He dodged back and forth easily until Kiba overswung. Then he appeared behind him and jabbed his fingers into Kiba's butt. Hidden Leaf secret technique. 1,000 years of pain. Kiba went flying, screaming the whole way, only to poof into Akamaru as he crashed into the water of the nearby river. The real Kiba appeared behind Kakashi, trying to grab him. Kakashi slipped out of the way and backhanded Kiba into a rock before disappearing. Kiba got up and shook his head as Akamaru dragged himself out of the water. A flash of light caught Kiba's attention, and he saw that a bell lay underneath the tree. He smiled as he went to pick it up, only to get Nusidera on the feet and dragged up, hanging upside down. Kakashi appeared in front of Kiba and started lecturing him, only to get nailed by numerous shurikens and kunai. Sasuke smirked from his position, unaware that Naruto was doing the same. "Sorry, Uchiha team. He's not a jounin for no reason." Kakashi turned into a weapon-riddled log as Sasuke cursed. "I've got to get a new position." He ran off. Sakura was doing the same, only to run into Kakashi. Lesson number 2, Genjutsu. Suddenly, Sakura was surrounded by leaves. She shook her head, and the leaves disappeared. Suddenly, there was a rustle in the leaves, and a voice saying Sakura. She turned, only to see Sasuke riddled with weapons. "He's too strong. Run," Sasuke said as he collapsed. Sakura stared in horror, then shook her head. "This is a genjutsu." She closed her eyes and muttered Kai. As she stopped her chakra, the illusion faded, and Sakura smirked until Kakashi chopped her in the back of the neck, knocking her out. Kiba was struggling to free himself when a kunai whistled out of nowhere and cut the rope. Kiba landed, but couldn't see who threw the kunai. He shrugged and ran off to find Kakashi. Sasuke found himself fighting Kakashi. He had actually forced him to put the book away, but still, Kakashi was outclassing him. He had almost touched one of the bells though. He landed and ran through a series of hand signs. Kakashi's eye widened in surprise. He's too inexperienced to use a ninjutsu. Fire style, Grand Fireball Jutsu. Sasuke unleashed a huge fireball at Kakashi. When he released it, Kakashi was gone. Sasuke smirked until he felt a pair of hands grab his ankles and drag him underground. Kakashi appeared in front of him. Lesson 3, Ninjutsu. Earth Style, Headhunter Jutsu. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a book to finish." Kakashi turned and left. Naruto just shook his head. "Pathetic. Sasuke and Sakura, it's so simple. I know Kiba has figured it out by now." Hinata and Shino were thinking the same thing as they watched their genin. Kiba rushed into the clearing as Sakura stumbled into it. She saw Sasuke and almost screamed, except Kiba covered her mouth. "He's fine. Just buried. Help me dig him out." Sakura nodded, and they hurriedly pulled him out of the hole. Kiba looked at both of them. "Guys, I think he's testing our teamwork. We need to work together to get the bells." Sakura slowly nodded. "I think so too. How can a genin beat a jounin? I almost did, and I don't need your guys' help. You'll just slow me down." Sasuke turned, only for the bell to ring. Kakashi appeared. "Well, that's that. Let's go." The group returned to the 3 stumps, where Kakashi tied up Sasuke, despite both his and Sakura's protests. Kakashi just looked at the two of them. "Sasuke is being tied up because he didn't get it. Kiba did, and you did too, Sakura. This is about teamwork. And because Sasuke didn't get it, I'm not even going to bother sending him back to the academy. He should just stop being a ninja. Maybe you too, Sakura. He turned away. You and Kiba can eat, and the three of you try again afterwards. Don't feed Sasuke, or you all fail. With that, he disappeared. Sakura and Kiba sat down with the bentos Kakashi had made. Kiba looked at his, then Sasuke, before offering it up to him. Halfsies, Sasuke and Sakura looked at him, and Kiba explained. He won't do any good if he's starving. And I don't smell Kakashi-sensei nearby. Sakura nodded, and was about to feed Sasuke when a tomato came flying at them, attached to a kunai. It thunked into the stump, and Sasuke eyed it. Kiba looked at it, before pulling it out, and handing it to Sakura, who held it up, while Sasuke bit into it. Almost immediately, Kakashi appeared, as dark clouds filled the sky, and lightning crackled in the air. What did I say? You weren't supposed to feed him. For that, you all pass, he said, his face becoming a smile, before he turned towards the trees. You all can come out now. Naruto, Hinata and Shino stepped out of the trees as Kakashi came over to them. What were you three doing? Their test, which they passed, Tyrannai said, as she and Elroth joined the group. I had them track your genin, and if possible, disrupt your test. And they passed with flying colors, since not one of your genin could find them, while mine never lost yours. Kakashi sighed as he shook his head. Is this a game to you? They could have caused my team to fail or pass when they didn't deserve to. Tyrannai shrugged. Consider it a lesson. Nothing ever goes as planned. With that, she signaled her genin, who left with her. Tyrannai smiled at all of them as they walked away. You all did exceptional work. Team 8 is official. Tomorrow, we begin our missions. The whole group cheered as they headed off, ready for the adventures and trials ahead. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Leaf Ranger on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.